Chapter 1101. Candace and Bambietta looked at each other and were secretly delighted. If Dustless refused to take them in, they would have no choice but to face the powerful Quincy. However, as soon as they took a step forward, they saw Dustless staring at them like a wolf. "Bastard, where are you looking at?" The hot-tempered Candace was the first to speak. She pointed at Dustless and said angrily, "Remember, being your subordinate doesn't mean selling my body to you. Take back your vulgar gaze." Following Dustless's line of sight, Dustless's eyes were fixed on Candace's collar. "Humph. Bambietta is your maid. That's your bet, not mine. If you want to look at her." Candace rolled her eyes and said arrogantly. Wu Chen's face was full of awkwardness. It was not a glorious thing to be caught peeping. However, looking at Candace's overbearing appearance, he was also very unhappy. He immediately teased, "You may not understand, but my subordinates must be omnipotent. They can kill enemies, love, fly in the sky, and swim in the sea. They must also solve their master's problems. Of course, they must also be good in a certain aspect." Hearing his words, Wu Chen's face was full of ridicule. His smiling face was very happy to see Candace suffer a setback. However, to everyone's surprise, although she was dissatisfied, she still clenched her teeth and didn't dare to lose her temper. "Forget it, there's no need to care about those trivial matters. It's all a joke. Let's go." Dustless turned around and walked away. The two women followed Yawatch's stern-crossed knights. The idea of the strong being respected was deeply ingrained in them. The words of the person with the bigger fist represented everything. They wouldn't resist Dustless's words and would only submit. Perhaps they really believed him now. "You have to take responsibility if you look at others." Bambietta, who suddenly fell silent, muttered, "Don't think that you'll be fine just because you're the one we're loyal to. You looked at Candace's breasts 15 times, her thighs 7 times, and my breasts 20 times. Hearing that, the corner of Dustless's mouth twitched, and he almost fell to the ground directly. "What do you want me to do?" Dustless wiped the sweat off his temples and turned his head. "If you want me to help you recover your strength or regain the ability of Holy Script, then forget it. I can't do that." His words sent the two girls to hell. Candace's and Bambietta's eyes dimmed. "As long as you help us kill Yawatch, we're willing to be your slaves. We're even willing to do those wretched things you're thinking of." Glancing at each other, Candace and Bambietta said fiercely. Their hatred for Yawatch was as deep as the ocean. The power that they had spent hundreds of years to gain was all taken away by that so-called saint. Their hatred for Wandless Empire had also reached an unprecedented level. They were willing to give up everything to kill Yawatch. Obscene things. Don't make it sound so unpleasant. It's human nature to indulge in food and sex, Dustless said softly as he glanced indifferently at Candace and Bambietta. The ability of Holy Script was unique to Yawatch, and Dustless couldn't do anything about it. Speaking of Yawatch, Dustless sneered and said coldly, "But killing Yawatch is inevitable. There can't be 2 suns in the sky, and there can't be 2 kings. He's still far from being able to ride on my head. His Majesty is very strong. I heard that his Holy Script ability is omniscience and omnipotence." Thinking of Yawatch, Candace and Bambietta's faces turned serious. This nightmarish cold and cruel character was pressing down on the two of them so hard that they couldn't breathe. Omniscience and omnipotence. Hearing this, Dustless couldn't help but feel a headache. Omniscience and omnipotence was indeed heaven-defying. It was more powerful than all the moves he currently had. Even the moves that Yawatch saw through could not do any real damage to him. After looking at each other, Candace and Bambietta said in unison, "I think Jugram used it before." "Just as I thought." Dustless's eyes flashed with realization. He had a new understanding of how difficult it was to deal with Jugram. However, this also meant that it was Jugram who had just left. He had forcibly extracted the power of Tsangdu. However, Busby, who I killed in the past, might have been resurrected by Jugram. Dustless thought to himself. Only then would Jugram know that the two women had betrayed him. Because Busby had witnessed everything, it was normal for him to tell Jugram everything after he was revived. Even though Busby hated Yawatch because Yawatch destroyed Busby's hometown, he was sincere to Jugram. Jugram and Busby had a very good relationship. Dustless even remembered that the two had known each other since they were young. It was normal for Jugram to resurrect Busby. After a while, Dustless suddenly said, "You two are lucky that only your power was extracted. I think you're gloating." Candace curled her lips and said disdainfully, "You can only do such despicable things because our power was extracted. Don't think that we don't know anything. This is called looting a burning house." Ridiculous. Dustless snorted and said, "With your strength, if I really wanted to do that kind of thing, do you really think you could resist me?" Hearing this, Candace and Bambietta were both stunned and speechless. They only fell silent when they thought of Dustless's achievements. He had single-handedly wiped out all the death gods. He definitely had the strength to crush them. Losing the ability of Holy Script also means that the two of you have nothing to do with Yawatch in the future. Even if he leaves again, the two of you have escaped the curse. The guillotine that has been hanging over your heads has disappeared. This is a blessing in disguise. Chapter 1102. Candace and Bambietta nodded in agreement. Although it was a pity to lose the ability to read the Holy Script, it also meant that they had completely lost their relationship with Yawatch, which was a blessing in disguise. Tsangdu is the best example, Dustless reminded them. Indeed. Candace and Bambietta shuddered at the thought of Tsangdu's miserable appearance. The cruel method of being drained dry and not even leaving a bone behind really shocked them. They immediately rejoiced. They could start over if they lost their strength, but if they lost their lives, they would never be able to return. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 10 days had passed. Dustless, Candace, and Bambietta also temporarily settled down in the modern world. During this time, Dustless had been tracking Shinji Kurosaki's whereabouts, but there was no trace of him. However, although they did not find any clues about Shinji Kurosaki, they did find a big shot. "You found Isshin Shiba? And he's with a female Quincy called Shinji Kurosaki. Are you kidding me?" Dustless looked at Candace and Bambietta, who were sitting on the sofa, in shock. He suddenly felt that his brain was not big enough, and the world was spinning like a paste. He had lost the most basic ability to think. "Yes, her name is Shinozaki Mikoto. She's just a cameo and won't appear in the future. After all, the main character stole Shinozaki Mikoto. I think she's the biological sister of Shinozaki Mikoto. She's also a pure-blood Quincy," Candace explained while sipping her drink. She had fallen in love with many things in the past few days in the modern world, but most of the time, she got it through robbery. Shinji Kurosaki. Dustless was speechless. He had never thought that there would be such a person. Moreover, she was also a pure-blood Quincy, and even Shinji Kurosaki's sister. The worst thing was that after Isshin Shiba lost his power, he was besieged by a greater void and almost lost his life. However, Shinji Kurosaki saved him and they fell in love at first sight. In the end, she became pregnant with Isshin Shiba's child. And just in case, Isshin changed his surname to Shinozaki Isshin. His child was also named Shinozaki Ichigo. A pure-blooded Quincy actually married a death god, and a powerless one at that. Bambietta's expression was strange. She could not describe her feelings. If it was in the past, she would definitely be very angry, thinking that this was trampling on the purebred Quincy bloodline. But now, she didn't feel anything. Instead, she was very happy. Forget it, that's not important. Haven't you found any traces of Kurosaki yet? After shaking his head, Dustless stopped thinking about it. He also turned a deaf ear to Shinozaki Ichigo. Shinozaki Ichigo was too weak. Whether it was him in the future or now, he was just an ant to Dustless. There's no trace of her. She dropped out of the school she used to go to. I don't know where she is now. Candace and Bambietta didn't know either. They were obviously curious about this Quincy who possessed both the power of a greater void and the power of the Grim Reaper. For Quincy, the void was a deadly poison that could not be touched. Well, finally touched the Hogyoku. Suddenly, a wisp of brilliance flashed across his eyes. Dustless said in pleasant surprise. Aizen didn't have any contact with the Hogyoku since he got it. Just now, Dustless, who was disguised as the Hogyoku's consciousness, felt the fluctuation of Aizen's spiritual pressure. Is this the Hogyoku's world? There's a space inside, it's amazing. Inside the Hogyoku's world, Aizen looked at the boundless purple air and muttered to himself. Welcome to the world inside the Hogyoku, I am its consciousness. A ripple appeared in the sky, and a cold voice suddenly spread. It's still conscious. Aizen Sosuke exclaimed in surprise. At the same time, his face turned gloomy as he unsheathed his Kyoka Suigetsu. You are my only host, my power is your power. After that, the Hogyoku's power was transferred to Aizen's body. Boom boom boom. A vast and majestic spiritual pressure broke out of his body, it was even stronger than Dustless's. This. No wonder that guy can get the strength to crush everything. With such a huge amount of spiritual pressure, I can do it too. Feeling the spiritual pressure in his body, Aizen couldn't help but feel excited. At the same time, he was surprised to find a special power condensing in his left shoulder. His left arm, which was destroyed by Dustless, seemed to be growing back. Aizen, who was suspicious by nature, immediately dispelled his doubts and felt grateful to the Hogyoku's consciousness. There's no need to help me grow my arm now. Aizen shook his head. A broken arm growing back would be suspicious. The Hogyoku's consciousness was also very smart and immediately stopped emitting spiritual pressure. I thought it was a substance that could break the boundary between Hollow and Shinigami, I didn't expect it to have a consciousness. Aizen sighed. At the same time, his vigilance disappeared. The endless spiritual pressure just now wasn't a lie, he believed the Hogyoku's consciousness. Incredible. Wait until you know I'm the Hogyoku's consciousness, you'll be shocked. Dustless, who was disguised as the Hogyoku's consciousness, sneered. He immediately began to trick Aizen, using this special identity to provoke him and Jugram to kill each other. Chapter 1103. Dustless, who was disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness, sneered again and again. He was extremely disgusted with Aizen Sosuke, especially after he joined forces with Jugram. Using you and Jugram to kill each other is exactly what I want. Dustless sneered. Suddenly, he thought of a plan and said, the Hogyoku can evolve infinitely. It can help the host break through the boundary between Shinigami and Hollow and reach a new realm. Hearing this, Aizen was stunned, and immediately said with enthusiasm, evolve. That's right, that guy has taken on several different forms. Thinking of Dustless, Aizen's eyes were filled with passion. Every time Dustless changed a form, his Ryatsu would increase dramatically. His speed, body hardness, and even his momentum would increase exponentially. No, 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 Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness said 3 times in a row and denied, the evolution you saw is incomplete. The evolution of creatures can't be as rough as him. In fact, it still needs a kind of power to evolve perfectly. Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness raised his voice and said, it also needs to add a lot of Quincy's soul to reach a higher realm, and finally touch the level of God. Quincy. What does the matter between Shinigami and Hollow have to do with them? Sosuke Aizen wasn't an idiot. His tone was full of doubt as he said, Quincy doesn't seem to be special. Hearing this, Dustless felt a headache coming on. It wasn't easy to fool Aizen Sosuke, any flaws would be discovered by him. After sorting out his thoughts, the disguised Hogyoku consciousness said, the ancestor of Quincy, Yawatch, is actually inextricably linked to the Grim Reaper. In a sense, the Spirit King is Yawatch. So, by combining the power of 3, we can break through the final boundary. Yawatch? That makes sense. Aizen Sosuke agreed. Then he suddenly realized something and asked, how can you, a Hogyoku's consciousness, know about Yawatch and Quincy? This is one of my abilities, I can read a person's mind. This is the information I got from the previous host, Dustless, who was killed. Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness knew Aizen would ask this, so he said indifferently, and your subordinate, Captain Ikamaru Jin, don't look at his loyalty on the surface. In fact, he is two-faced and often wants to take your life. At the critical moment, Dustless sold Ikamaru Jin without any moral integrity. You can really read a person's mind. Aizen's suspicion disappeared without a trace, because he knew that Ikamaru Jin deliberately approached him, and when he found a chance in the future, he would kill him. But only Sosuke Aizen knew about this secret. Now that Hogyoku's consciousness knew about it, it meant what he said was true. This means that the Hogyoku consciousness can really read a person's mind. Idiot, you want to fight with me? This is the blessing of a transmigrator, foreseeing the future. Dustless, who was disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness, sneered again and again. If Sosuke Aizen still had doubts before, he now believed in Dustless's Hogyoku. We need more and more Quincy's soul. Currently, Wanless Empire's Stern-Cross Knights are the most suitable. Each of them has Yawatch's power. Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness continued, if we want to reach an unprecedented limit, we have to merge Quincy's soul into Hogyoku. Then I can provide more power to the host. Jugram, Sosuke Aizen was obviously tempted, his eyes flashing with uncertainty. However, he still had a cooperative relationship with Wandenrake. There's no need to rush this, let's wait for a while. After taking a deep breath to calm himself down, Aizen regained his wisdom and said, there's still a long way to go. It's not too late to test this out first. This guy is really hard to deal with. Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness was confused, test. There's no one to test this on. There's no one with Quincy's power, Hollow's power, and Shinigami's power at the same time. Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness suddenly remembered Shinozaki Ichigo. Because Dustless didn't save him, Isshin Shiba was turned into a Hollow. As his son, Ichigo Shinozaki must have inherited the power of Hollow and Shinigami. As for Quincy's power, it came from his mother. Captain Shiba is married to a Quincy, and they have a child. Let's use him as a test subject. Sosuke Aizen's eyes lit up. But, Aizen continued, Shinozaki Ichigo was just born. When he grows up, I'll send someone to awaken him. That's up to you. Dustless's Hogyoku consciousness opened his mouth, but he didn't say anything in the end. He originally wanted Jugram's quencher, but who would have thought that the trouble would be shifted to Shinozaki Ichigo? But we can't let Jugram's Quincy go either. Aizen Sosuke's body was covered in an ominous glint, his eyes filled with killing intent. Jugram had once threatened him, and Sosuke Aizen would never let him off, be it in public or private. Now's not the time, I still need time to prepare. Aizen suddenly said. That's not up to you. Dustless said disdainfully. Aizen was just a pawn, he didn't have the right to choose. Chapter 1104. Aizen Sosuke was very excited. If what Hogyoku said was true, then his day of becoming a god was just around the corner. When that time comes, he will be able to climb to a higher level than Dustless. I really regret killing him. Sosuke Aizen suddenly said, his tone was full of regret. Regret killing him. Hearing this, Dustless disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness asked directly, is it that Captain Dustless? Of course it's him. Aizen Sosuke said disappointedly, using his failure as a foil to my greatness, what a perfect play. Too bad that guy was killed by Silver. Sigh. What a self-righteous idiot. Dustless disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness disdained Aizen Sosuke and slandered him in his mind. If you know I'm still alive, you'll be scared half to death. Kanzucho. After failing to bewitch Aizen Sosuke, Dustless began to think of other countermeasures. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have let that kid die in such a hurry. Dustless sighed while lying on the sofa. The him he was talking about was Tsangdu. Dustless's room was very luxurious, decorated with all kinds of luxurious furniture. The ceiling was made of crystal, and it was very dazzling. Of course, Dustless didn't have the money to buy these things. Bambietta and Candace robbed him. What's there to worry about? Just go to Wandless Empire. Candace sat next to Dustless and encouraged him. A seductive body fragrance drifted into Wu Chen's nose. Wu Chen glanced at the scantily dressed Candace. She just wore a pair of panties and a bra casually, and her body was still wet. Apparently, she had just climbed out of the swimming pool. Naturally, the swimming pool was also robbed. Even this villa was robbed. Now go and kill Wandless Empire, and we'll be yours. You can do whatever you want with us. Bambietta also approached Dustless. Both of them were wearing swimsuits, and their curvaceous bodies were exposed to Dustless. Even Candace, who was the most courageous among them, took the initiative to provoke Dustless. She deliberately blew hot air into his ear and lowered her chest, exposing her dazzling cleavage. Save it. If I am so easily seduced, I would have died decades ago. Dustless said disdainfully, but his eyes couldn't help but take a few more glances at Candace's chest. He would be a bastard if he didn't take advantage of her. Humph. Coward. Candace said discontentedly. She then twirled her beautiful green hair and said, I really don't know what you're worried about. Scruples. Of course not. It's just that I don't like to waste my energy. Even if I kill them, it won't solve the root of the problem. After Yawatch revives, I can use Saint to revive those Quinistas at any time. All in all, killing them would be useless. It wouldn't do anything. Yuchen stretched and said tiredly, besides, even if we really want to take care of Wandenrake, we can just use that little pawn, Sosuke Aizen. Huff, a sense of weariness penetrated deep into his bone marrow. When Wu Chen was planning to sleep, a burst of violent tremors made his sleepiness disappear. Boom boom boom. A huge ripple spread out, and then a huge wave exploded. The swimming pool that Candace and Bambietta used to play in was instantly blown into ruins. This abnormal spiritual pressure. It doesn't feel like the Grim Reaper, nor a void. Are they Quinistas again? There's no end to this. Wu Chen's eyes turned cold as he sneered. Bastard, my swimming pool. Candace and Bambietta roared at the same time and shot out like cannonballs, directly pouncing on the figure standing in the sky. How dare they attack so openly? It seems that the connection between Soul Society and the modern world has been cut off. But, this is good. Dustless walked out with a cold smile. Are you kidding me? I'm His Majesty's greatest masterpiece, and I have to take care of these small fries. The figure in the sky looked down at the ruins and complained with dissatisfaction, as if he had been greatly insulted. His face was full of resentment. This person had dark skin, and his left eye, which was always closed, was covered with a black crosshair mark. He wore white gloves with an X embroidered on them, a sleeveless shirt, and a fur shoulder armor on the right side of the shirt. He wore a two-horned hat made of white fur, with a small symbol of enrich on each side of the hat. The most striking thing was that he was holding a cross-shaped gun in his hand, which was obviously his weapon. Ligebarrow. After seeing the newcomer clearly, Candace and Bambietta were both startled, fear flashing in their eyes. The man with the gun in front of them was not as simple as Quinistas. He was one of Yawach's personal guards, and the captain of the guards. Known as the man closest to God, he was Yawach's most perfect creation. Kill yourselves. Before your power was extracted, you were ants to me. Now that your power has been extracted, you are not even ants, Ligebarrow said disdainfully. You are the one who should kill yourself. A ray of light descended from the sky, enveloping Ligebarrow entirely. A powerful force exploded out from him. Get down. As soon as he finished speaking, the light became several times stronger, and directly suppressed Ligebarrow, who fell to the ground with severe burns all over his body. I'll make you into one of the 6 paths of pain to sneak attack Sosuke Aizen and provoke you to kill each other. Dustless walked up to Ligebarrow and smiled coldly. Chapter 1105. Yawach's personal guards were all extremely powerful. They could take on Team Zero by themselves, and they could even wipe them out. Of course, strength was not the most important factor, because there were many powerful people in this world. Stepping on Ligebarrow's burned body, he laughed and said, one of Yawach's personal guards is the left arm of the Spirit King, and the other is the heart of the Spirit King. You little black bastard, you must be a part of the Spirit King's body, right? Pfft. Candace and Bambietta couldn't help but burst out laughing, not caring about their image at all. Yawach's personal guards had a very high status in Wandless Empire. Now that Ligebarrow, the captain of the personal guards, was mocked by Dustless as a little black bastard, his lungs were probably about to explode. I dare you to say that again. As expected, Ligebarrow flew into a rage and roared with a ferocious face, how dare you talk to the messenger of God like that? Who gave you the confidence to do that? Do you believe that I, woo-woo? Before he could finish his sentence, Dustless's smelly foot had mercilessly blocked his mouth. I will definitely kill you. Ligebarrow's face turned red as he roared towards the sky. His voice was trembling. His eyes were red, and he wanted to tear Dustless into pieces. In Wandless Empire, Yawach's personal guards were all favored by the heavens, and they had received special care. Other than Jugram, everyone else was extremely respectful towards them. Now, Dustless actually stepped on his mouth with the sole of his smelly shoe. How dare he? Ligebarrow's self-esteem was severely damaged. His dignity was also being challenged. You should not be at the peak of strength yet, right? To be honest, killing a bug like you does not give me any sense of accomplishment. However, I like to teach those arrogant fellows a lesson, especially people like you. Dustless said coldly as he spat out cold air that could freeze living things. You are the arrogant one. Ligebarrow roared towards the sky. Spiritual droplets that had materialized erupted from his body, and they were covered with many patterns. At first glance, it looked extremely mysterious. External blood stasis equipment. With that order, the special circle covered with many patterns spread out rapidly, swallowing Dustless's entire body in almost an instant. He didn't even have time to react. Ligebarrow also took this opportunity to escape from Dustless's smelly soles. Tui tui tui. Unlucky. Hurriedly spitting out the dust in his mouth, Ligebarrow was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. A single slip would cause everlasting sorrow. He had been careless for a moment and had eaten a broken shoe sole. All of you must die. Looking around, Ligebarrow said fiercely. His eyes were fixed on Candace and Bambietta, and a blood-red mist floated out from behind him. They were all formed by his killing intent. Idiot. You want to kill me with this shampoo? Seeing that Li Jiabero was ignoring his existence, Dustless had no choice but to stand out and make his presence known. Li Jiabero turned his head around as if he had seen a ghost. When he saw Dustless's expressionless face and his unchanging black eyes, he was so shocked that his jaw almost dislocated. The external blood stasis equipment's ferocious spiritual pressure was circulating around Dustless's body. The terrifyingly high temperature of several million degrees Celsius was circulating around Dustless's body. However, Dustless was completely unscathed. What made Li Jiabero want to vomit blood the most was that Dustless actually said that the external blood stasis equipment was a shampoo. However, based on the current situation, it was indeed a shampoo. Not only did Dustless not feel any discomfort, he was even humming a tune that made Li Jiabero feel nauseous. You forced me to do this. I didn't want to use that at first, but since you want to be disemboweled, I'll fulfill your wish. Li Jiabero said cruelly. He raised his strangely shaped cross spear and aimed it at Dustless's head. You really don't know etiquette. Do you know what it means to return the favor? With such an unruly subordinate, Yawach must be an ignorant old man. With a faint luster all over his body, Dustless approached Li Jiabero in an instant, and the edge of destruction appeared in his hand. Armament hockey hardening. The black iron fist mercilessly blasted towards Li Jiabero's face. Caw caw caw. A crisp sound of bones breaking was heard. Under a heavy blow, Li Jiabero was blown away by Dustless. His whole face was directly sunken. As for his nose, he no longer had such an organ. I'll tear you to pieces. Li Jiabero screamed in pain and cursed in anger. He was shocked and angry. He touched his face in disbelief. His bones were creaking, and his whole body was exuding the power of destruction. The cross spear was aimed at Dustless's chest without hesitation. Be careful, his ability is universal connection. Don't get hit by him, or the consequences will be unimaginable. Candace and Bambietta both urged anxiously. Li Jiabero sneered, and all the power that he had accumulated for a long time erupted. Bang! A huge beam of light flew towards Dustless at an extremely fast speed. Almost at the moment when the spear was shot, Dustless was penetrated, and he didn't even have a chance to react. He didn't even have time to run. This is the price of angering me. Li Jiabero's face bloomed with a cold smile, and he turned the spear to aim at Candace and Bambietta. Dustless, who was supposed to be dead, emitted a strange energy fluctuation. Seeing such a strange scene, Li Jiabero was directly petrified. Looking at Dustless, who came back from the dead in the blink of an eye, he suddenly felt that his whole body was fixed. This ability, how can ordinary people have it? Even His Majesty doesn't have it. Who allowed you, a mortal, to have it? You don't deserve it. Li Jiabero roared in annoyance, and his tone was like a wild beast. Chapter 1106. Dustless's shattered body was reconstructed and restored to its original state without any injuries. His skin was shining, no different from the skin of a beautiful girl. Staring at the crazy Rita Barrow as if nothing had happened, Dustless immediately labeled him as a retard. You mean the ability of super regeneration? Yawach doesn't have it, so, he's a rookie. He doesn't even have such an ordinary ability. Rita Barrow, who worshipped Yawach, was so angry that his face turned red. He raised his hand and shot out a dense number of sharp arrows. Great Sage Bow. The thick arrows whistled through the air. They were aimed at Dustless's eyes, heart, limbs, and the rest of the arrows were aimed at his soft abdomen. Divine Might. The moment the arrows touched Dustless's body, a ripple appeared in the void and quickly twisted, forming a huge vortex. The arrows didn't even touch Dustless's clothes and went into the vortex. It was like a stone falling into the sea, without splashing any waves. I heard that your ability is to connect all things. Regardless of whether there is something blocking you, you can pierce through the target you aim at. Now it seems that your ability is useless against me. Dustless laughed. His voice was quiet and clear. It was very pleasant in the eyes of Candace and Bambietta, but it was deadly in the ears of Rita Barrow. What was a battle? Not to mention other factors, at least it needed to touch someone's body. Now it was simply shameless. Amaterasu. Black flames floated in his hand. Unlike before, Dustless didn't release Amaterasu this time. Instead, he directly used karmic earth to compress it into a big black sword. Anyone who was cut by Amaterasu would be burned by Amaterasu. Heavenly hand power. Dustless's eyes widened, and he disappeared without even noticing the trajectory of his movement. Witnessing such an unimaginable scene from Dustless, Ligia Barrow was speechless. Just at this moment, he suddenly felt a fatal attack coming from behind. In such a short time and at such a close distance, he had no time to defend or retreat. Without any hesitation, he opened his left eye that had a special symbol drawn on it. So, the black sword that was about to cut Ligia Barrow in half penetrated his body. However, the next scene made Wu Qin stunned. This guy. What a mysterious ability. Amaterasu's compressed greatsword pierced through Rige Barrow, but he was unharmed. This ability was very similar to Obito's Kamui, which made him immune to all physical attacks. Moreover, he didn't have as many restrictions as Obito. As long as he opened his eyes, no physical attack in the world would be effective against him. This is the Holy Script ability that Yawatch gave you. No wonder you obey him so much, Dustless said in surprise as he put away the black sword that was compressed by Amaterasu. Richibarro was no different from an invisible person. Physical attacks were ineffective against him. In Wanless Empire, my codename is X and my ability is Universal Connection. I am His Majesty's most outstanding work, and the person closest to God. Rige Barrow said arrogantly. Don't think that you are the only one who can be immune to physical attacks. I am no exception. When I open my left eye, my Universal Connection ability will come into play. Before this, I was just playing house with you. Candace and Bambietta frowned as they heard this. Their hearts were in their throats. This was what made Rige Barrow so powerful. He had invincible strength and invincible ability. Only such a person could be Yawatch's personal guard, and Rige Barrow was the captain of the personal guard. This was enough to show how powerful and extraordinary he was. Is that so? Hearing this, Wu Chen was neither sad nor happy. Only his eyes began to change. Being immune to physical attacks is praiseworthy, but are you immune to illusions? I am an all-rounder. With a sneer, Dustless's Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan shot out a demonic luster, making people not dare to look at it directly. Just a glance would cause people to be immersed in it, and their soul and thoughts would be completely devoured. Boom! The moment the Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan appeared, Rige Barrow's physical attack immunity that he was so proud of immediately lost its effect, and he fell to the ground. Universal Connection could pass through any attack, but it could not defend against illusions that had no substance. How does this feel? In Tsukuyomi world, Dustless was holding a blade, and there were countless shadow clones around him. Without exception, all of them looked the same as Dustless, and almost all of them had blades in their hands. Gulp. Rige Barrow looked up at the sky. The whole world was extremely oppressive, and there were only countless Dustless in front of him. What is this situation? How could this happen? Calm down, I am invincible, no one can hurt me. He must have used some kind of demonic technique to make me fall into a trance, causing this illusion to appear in my mind. Rige Barrow looked at Dustless who was strolling over and tried his best to remain calm. Very smart, this is indeed an illusion. Dustless admitted, however, Tsukuyumi World's exaggerated illusion is extraordinary, and it can be said to be invincible. Especially for people like you who have weak mental defense, it is even more invincible. Moreover, the torture of the illusion world on you will be transferred to reality. With an evil smile on his face, Dustless at this time was particularly gloomy and terrifying, at least in Raj Barrow's eyes. Even the evil spirits in hell were not as bad as him. He was simply the incarnation of the devil. Do you know what will happen if countless shadow clones stab you? Aren't you the messenger of God? Then you should be very resistant to beatings, right? Chapter 1107. Looking at the endless crowd of people walking towards him, it was as if they could topple the mountains and overturn the seas. Gulp. Lichia Barrow's face was filled with disgust as he looked at the countless shadows of Dustless holding swords. This was the first time in his life that he felt this way. He hurriedly adjusted the spiritual pressure in his body, trying to break free from the cross on his back. However, the spiritual pressure in his body seemed to have been drained and was half out of balance, completely ignoring him. Such a gloomy world was enough to make people tremble. There were countless people holding large sabers, threatening to cut him into pieces. No one would be able to remain calm in such a situation. After all, he couldn't move now. Messengers of God are very durable. Let me test whether you are qualified or not. With an evil smile, Dustless ordered the shadow clones to pounce on Lichia Barrow. What's going on? The outside world had turned into ruins, and only 4 living beings were left. Dustless, Candace, Bambietta, and of course, Lichia Barrow was covered in cold sweat. At this moment, his face was pale, and he no longer looked as arrogant as before. Instead, he was in great pain. Why did you suddenly become like this when you were fine just now? What kind of evil thing did you do? Candace looked at Dustless with a thirst for knowledge. Lichia Barrow was still domineering a second ago, but who would have thought that he would fall to the ground in the next second and end up like this? His body was covered in cold sweat, and his face was pale as if he had suffered a great deal of pain. It was worse than death. It's very simple. He said he was a messenger of God, and I just let him experience what a messenger of God should do. He should thank me. Dustless shrugged, as if it had nothing to do with him. I will not let you go. After a while, Lichia Barrow opened his blood-red eyes, and his body was trembling in anger. He had been killed by Dustless several times. This blood feud must be settled. You still want to take revenge in this state? The Quincy division led by Yawatch is indeed crazy. Then, can you tell me which part of your body is the Spirit King? Left leg or right leg? Dustless asked as he turned a deaf ear to Jurij Barrow's murderous aura. On the surface, Lichia Barrow was glaring at Dustless with hatred. However, his heart was in turmoil. Even though he tried to cover it up, Dustless could still hear his heavy breathing. Where did this bastard get this information? The only person in Wandless Empire who knows about our identity is Jugram. She got the news from there. Lichia Barrow was shocked. He looked at Candace and Bambietta like a wolf and then shook his head slightly. Although they were both members of the Stern Ritter, the world they lived in was completely different. They were just pawns. It doesn't matter whether I tell you or not. You're going to become a zombie soon, Dustless said suddenly, and a black metal rod appeared in his hand. Living dead. Are you still asleep? His Majesty's personal guards are immortal. This saint can easily change everything and has the power to revive us from the underworld. Lichia Barrow said with disdain, get it straight. I'm not like that Sangdu from before. That kind of idiot will always be a pawn. Take note, I'm talking about living dead, not really killing you. Dustless shook his finger as a cunning smile appeared on his face. He said sinisterly, I know that after killing you, Yawatch or Jugram can revive you. But if I keep your heartbeat and only take away your consciousness, do you know what that means? Hearing this, Li Jiabarrow's face changed and turned green. He suddenly understood what dustless meant. Turning him into a killing tool with no consciousness but still keeping his heartbeat, he wouldn't be dead and couldn't be revived. Li Jiabarrow looked up and glared at Dustless. Wanless Empire often said that the Grim Reaper was evil, but he felt that this bastard in front of him was thousands of times more evil than the Grim Reaper. Pucci. While Li Jiabarrow was cursing Dustless, he felt a sharp pain in his right leg. He saw the black iron rod piercing into his leg. What scared him the most was that he lost all feeling in his right leg. Li Jiabarrow was shocked. Looking at the black iron rod that appeared in Dustless's hand, he wanted to open his left eye and activate the Universal Link ability to ignore physical attacks. But the injuries he suffered before didn't allow him to do so. It was hard to even keep his consciousness. Pucci. 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 Another black iron rod flew out and pierced into Li Jiabarrow's left leg, arms, and heart. Next is your head. Dustless squatted down and looked at the terrified Li Jiabarrow. He smiled and said sarcastically, funny, even the messenger of God can feel fear. Li Jiabarrow immediately turned his head and looked into Dustless's eyes. He shouted, since the Grim Reaper respects the Spirit Kings so much, you should bow down to us. Sorry, I'm not. On the contrary, I want to replace the Spirit King. You guys are really an eyesore. The Spirit King's arms and legs are in your personal guards. There's even a Spirit King's heart. That's why it's best if you guys die. Dustless smiled. What Li Jiabarrow said was the truth. After all, there were two members of Yuhabaka's personal guards who were part of the Spirit King's body. Since the Grim Reaper really respected the Spirit King, he should respect them who were part of the Spirit King's body. Chapter 1108. From Dustless's point of view, Li Jiabarrow was admitting defeat. You want to replace the Spirit King? Dream on. The one who will replace the Spirit King and become the ruler of the three realms is His Majesty. Li Jiabarrow retorted. Obviously, he was brainwashed by Yawatch and couldn't be more loyal. Let me ask you one last question. Where is Yawatch's sleeping place? Dustless narrowed his eyes and asked calmly. Humph. Don't say that I don't know. Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you. Li Jiabarrow said stubbornly. Although Dustless said it gently, he smelled a strong murderous intent. If Dustless knew that Yawatch was sleeping somewhere, Yawatch would probably be beheaded immediately. Then, goodbye. Dustless was too lazy to ask such a brainwashed loyalist. The deep black iron rod was directly inserted into his mind, and his will and consciousness were instantly taken away. The various tissues in his mind were instantly annihilated, leaving only his beating heart. He had turned into an existence similar to a human in a vegetative state, his eyes empty and lifeless. This is the living dead I was talking about, the living dead. Standing up and moving his stiff limbs, Dustless turned to Candace and Bambietta, who were in a daze, and said, I'm going to Soul Society now. You two can do whatever you want. It's good if Shinozaki Shinya can be found. If not, it doesn't matter. Dustless repeated. You're going to Soul Society. Candace looked at Dustless suspiciously, confused. She didn't know what he was planning, but from the gloomy and malicious sneer, it wasn't hard to see that Dustless was up to no good. At the same time, Li Jiabarrow stood up and moved slowly to the surprise of the two girls. Don't tell me, you want to control Li Jiabarrow to attack Soul Society. Candace and Bambietta were stunned as they suddenly understood Dustless's intention. Think about it, the Quincy Legion that should have been wiped out thousands of years ago suddenly reappeared in the world and boldly attacked Soul Society. It was self-evident how big the aftermath would be. This would directly cause the Grim Reaper to start a war with Quincy again. Hee hee. When did the two of you become so smart? I do plan to use the hands of the Grim Reaper to get rid of Quincy. It's best if both of them suffer. Dustless sneered. All he needed to do was to expose all traces of Quincy, especially the identity of Rich Barrow. It was Yawatcha's personal guard, and the captain of the personal guard. At that time, Shinigami and Quincy would fight again. It would be difficult for Wandenrake to stay out of it. Whether it was Sosuke Aizen, Jugram, or even Shinigami, they would all be involved in this sudden war. There were no clouds in Soul Society, it was clear and sunny. Rich Barrow, who was controlled by Dustless, had secretly infiltrated Soul Society and even came to Yamamoto's favorite place, the Shin Spiritual Academy. This was the academy that nurtured Shinigami, and it was extremely important to Soul Society. Almost all of the Godai 13th Shinigami came from the Shin Spiritual Academy. Whether it was Sosuke Aizen, Jin Ikamaru, Jushiro Yukitake, or Shunsui Kiraku, they were all students of the Shin Spiritual Academy. It was a place that nurtured Shinigami, and it was extremely important to Old Man Yamamoto. Hee hee. Captain Yamamoto will probably explode from anger if we ambush here. In a hidden alley, Dustless sneaked a glance at the students passing by. His eyes were cold, and his whole body exuded a chill that isolated him from the world. Even the surroundings were covered in ice. Soul Society is really efficient. The Shin Spiritual Academy was destroyed last time, and it's back to normal in such a short time. Dustless sighed. At the same time, it was not difficult to see how much importance Yamamoto attached to the Shin Spiritual Academy. What a pity, it's going to wither soon. Behind him, Ligia Barrow walked out of the dark gold. As a precaution, Dustless buried all the black rods in his body. On the surface, he looked like a normal person, but in reality, his body was filled with a large number of black rods. Boom boom boom. The true Central Spiritual Art Academy was filled with people and laughter. Suddenly, a violent explosion rang out, and a huge fireball swept across the entire academy. A young man with dark skin walked out of the flames. It was Ligia Barrow, who Dustless secretly controlled. Who is he? He's fine after being hit by the explosion. Needless to say, he's definitely an enemy. Let's go together and kill him. Groups of Death God students rushed towards Ligia Barrow at the same time. Newborn calves are not afraid of tigers. As expected, the ignorant are fearless. Dustless, who was secretly observing the situation, sneered. He immediately tried to use Quincy's ability to absorb large amounts of Reiki and gather them in his body. Majestic Reiki spread out, and the people who were affected by the corrosion were in a terrible state. Outer shell blood stasis equipment. The circular pattern domain spread out and covered a radius of 20 meters. The students who were attacked instantly turned into a pool of blood. It seems like they're all here. Attacking the Shin Spiritual Academy was the right choice. Dustless, who was hiding in the dark, suddenly looked in the direction of Quiet Soul Society. Several huge Reiki swept over. Among them, there was a dark red flame that was extremely terrifying, burning the entire sky until it was distorted. In the dark, Dustless saw the furious Yamamoto. Chapter 1109. Captain Yamamoto's body erupted with blazing flames that almost engulfed the entire sky. The sky that he swept across was dyed red, and his long beard stood up in anger. This old man is probably going to vomit blood. Looking at the corpses all over the place, Dustless secretly laughed. This method was equivalent to cutting off a piece of flesh from Old Man Yamamoto's heart. It was enough for him to feel the pain for a long time. Stop it for this old man. The thunderous roar reverberated in the ears of everyone. Looking up, old man Yamamoto was standing in the void with a murderous aura. The pillar of fire that erupted from his body shot straight to the sky. The entire sky of Soul Society turned red, as if it was the dusk of doomsday. The penetrating temperature was enough to make people tremble in fear. "You think I'll help you just because you say so?" Dustless, who was secretly controlling Yamamoto, said with disdain. Dustless only had one impression of old man Yamamoto: rotten. Although he gave off the feeling of being a neighbor's grandfather, it was actually not the case. 1,000 years ago, he was the one who created the Godei 13. At that time, Soul Society was still an assassin group, and Captain Yamamoto was the leader of that group of cold-blooded assassins. It was enough to tell what kind of person he was. Just like what Yawatch said when he invaded Soul Society, 1,000 years of peace had worn down Captain Yamamoto's spirit. "Who are you?" Captain Yamamoto stared at Rita Barrow, who was wreaking havoc, and asked sternly. Ryujin Jaka was already unsheathed, and the blade was wrapped in blazing flames. Rita Barrow, who was controlled by Dustless, didn't reply. Instead, he used his actions to explain everything. Outer shell blood stasis armor. With Rita Barrow as the center, the circular energy shield quickly spread out again and almost instantly closed in on Captain Yamamoto. This is annihilation. Captain Yamamoto couldn't help but be stunned. Immediately, he waved Ryujin Jaka, and blazing flames shot out. The rune field that was rushing towards him instantly collapsed. Dustless saw this and laughed secretly. He imitated Rita Barrow's tone and used his body to speak. "Don't you understand? Of course, I'm annihilation, you bunch of death god idiots." Head Captain Yamamoto's expression changed. To him, the words annihilation sure were taboo. Moreover, the blood-calming armor that he used before was indeed a Quincy skill, and his identity was not fake. "Are you wondering why we haven't been destroyed? Of course, how could the wise and mighty His Majesty be defeated by you mere Grim Reapers? Don't talk about such ridiculous things in the future." Dustless controlled Li Jia Barrow to reveal his identity and said proudly, "I am the captain of His Majesty Yawatch's personal guard, Li Jia Barrow. My code name is X, and my ability is Universal Connection." Do you death gods really think that the Wanless Empire is extinct? Big mistake. Dustless continued to control Li Jia Barrow's body as he mocked, "Don't think too highly of yourself. Not only have we not gone extinct, but we have also grown stronger over the past 1,000 years. It won't be long before we flatten your Soul Society." Boom, boom, boom. Blazing spiritual pressure erupted and swept across Soul Society like a hot knife through butter. The Grim Reapers who came from all directions hurriedly avoided the attack of this violent spiritual pressure. Some of the captains knew that the head captain was about to go crazy. If that's the case, it won't be long before the head captain sends someone to investigate the Wanless Empire, Dustless muttered to himself as he looked at Yamamoto in the void. At the same time, in another direction. Who can explain to me what's going on? Who allowed him to do this? Jugram's cold voice sounded from within the Wanless Empire. Crack, crack, crack. Cracks began to appear on the surrounding buildings, and the atmosphere was oppressive. We sent Li Jia to eliminate the two traitors in the real world, so why did he suddenly turn around and attack Soul Society? He even revealed the secret that we've been hiding for 1,000 years. Was his brain damaged by Yamamoto's Ryujin Jakoka? Gerald Valkyrie, who was also one of Yawatch's personal guards, said angrily. He also had a special identity, the Heart of the Soul King. Jugram, what should we do? The other 3 personal guards looked at Jugram. He was Yawatch's personal guard and the next king of the Wanless Empire. Jugram was also in a dilemma. His thoughts had reached a dead end. Li Jia Barrow had already exposed their tracks, so the chances of them continuing to hide were 0. We might as well kill the Grim Reaper. Even without His Majesty, we still have enough strength to cripple the Grim Reaper. I suggest we start a war with them immediately. Gerald Valkyrie said, his frivolous tone disdainful of the Grim Reaper. Yawatch's personal guards called themselves messengers of the gods, and they looked down on everyone. In the sky above the Esoteric Academy, the shock waves from the battle between the two figures covered the entire Quiet Soul Society. Since it was Dustless's first time controlling Quincy, he was very inexperienced in using it. As a result, Ligia Barrow was constantly suppressed. His body was burned full of holes, and scars could be seen everywhere. No matter what, the framing this time was a success. Dustless was relieved. He was sure that Wanless Empire would not be able to hide in the dark from now on. In the face of such heavy losses, after Yamamoto dealt with Ligia Barrow, he would definitely use the power of the Grim Reaper to search for traces of Quincy all over the world. Some things could be laughed off by the head captain, but some things had to be investigated to the end. Chapter 11:10. Just like the current situation, not to mention the fact that a large number of students of Xeno Academy died, even if this accident didn't happen, the head captain would still investigate the matter of Quincy. Especially since Barrow admitted that he was Yawatch's subordinate, and his origin wasn't simple, he was the captain of Yawatch's personal guard. This is going to be a good show, you guys can slowly fight. Dustless, who was hiding in the darkness, looked up at the sky, and he could clearly see the figures of the captains, Jushiro Yukitake, Shunsui Kaiokura, Higashi Shiroshi. Anyway, the captains were all here. However, Dustless's line of sight was always fixed on Sosuke Aizen, and his eyes flashed with a cunning smile. Old man, it's time to retreat, I'll play with you next time. Barrow's casual provocation made head captain Yamamoto's forehead bulge with blue veins. Instead of saying that Barrow was deliberately provoking him, it was better to say that Dustless was deliberately angering head captain Yamamoto. After all, he was now controlling Barrow with the ability of Rinnegan. Arrogant brat. Head captain Yamamoto roared, and the Ryujin Jaka in his hand rolled, and a blazing explosion followed. Scorching hell. The earth trembled, and dozens of thick pillars of fire rose from the ground, covering almost the entire Soul Society, and the sky was red. That inexplicable bastard, does he want to live too long? He dares to deliberately anger old man Yamamoto, even if he wants to die, don't drag us down with him. Shunsui Kaiokura cursed, even if the blazing flames weren't deliberately aimed at him, his whole body was like water that was about to evaporate. Idiot. Glancing at Shunsui Kaiokura, Dustless directly defined him as an idiot. Although this man was actually very careful and strong, Dustless always felt that this guy's brain was somewhat damaged. All the captains are here, the game ends here. Seeing that all the captains were in place, Dustless used the power of Rinnegan to control Barrow to retreat. He was deliberately attracting the attention of these captains, there was no need to fight. In front of this old man, you still want to run. In the next 1,000 years, no one will be able to escape from me. Not Yawatch, not you. Head Captain Yamamoto sneered when he saw Ryuji Barrow turning around and retreating. He gave up on chasing after him and simply stood in the air. He believed that Ryuji Barrow would turn around and run back. You want to escape from Yuanlu Zai Sensei's flowing fire Jaka. This is unrealistic and impossible. Yukitake Jushiro shook his head and did not look at Ryuji Barrow. The strongest Shinigami in the past 1,000 years was not just for show. Humph. A bunch of self-righteous idiots. Under the capture of Rinnegan, Dustless clearly saw the changes in the expressions of the captains in the sky, and immediately said sarcastically, "Thousands of years of peace, no strong enemy has appeared, causing you people to boast about the strength of the captain to the sky." With a strange smile on the corner of his mouth, Dustless controlled Ryuji Barrow to fly to the giant fire pillar, and then suddenly shouted, "All things connect." Under everyone's stunned gaze, Ryuji Barrow's whole body floated over the thick fire pillar. He ignored my attack. How is that possible? Yamamoto's calm face fell. It was so gloomy that water could drip from it. This kind of violation was completely a cheating skill. Head Captain Yamamoto suddenly thought of a similar figure. Very young, with a spring breeze smile on the corner of his mouth, very thin, looked like a 17 or 18 years old boy, but his strength was incredible. He alone annihilated all the Shinigami except for himself and the Zero Squad. It was Dustless. Similarly, Dustless was also a cheating maniac, and he was immune to physical attacks. Why are you still standing there? Chase him. Seeing the captains were still in a daze, Head Captain Yamamoto ordered loudly, annihilate that guy at all costs, if you can catch him alive, if not. Humph. I don't need to say it, you all understand. The captains looked at each other and chased after Raiji Baro. The head captain's anger was enough to make people tremble in fear. Even if they were captains, facing the strongest Shinigami, they didn't have the slightest intention to resist. They immediately chased after Raiji Baro. Mayuri immediately sealed the connection between Soul Society and the outside world. Silver, I keep feeling that something isn't right. I'll use the Mirror's Moon ability to confuse these captains. You find a chance to go to the underground laboratory in Central Room 46 to observe the situation. I've placed the Hingyu there, so we can't lose it. There's something wrong with this Quincy. Jugram is extremely sinister, so be careful. Ikamaru Jin nodded. Aizen's worry wasn't without reason. Jugram's eyes seemed to be able to detect everything. Ikamaru Jin felt a little weak when he looked at Jugram. TSK. Aizen is really smart. Dustless praised. Raiji Baro was behind him. At this moment, in the dark Central Room 46, there was a dead silence, eerie and terrifying. The rotten bones on the ground were clearly visible, there were even a lot of spider webs on them. Central Room 46 was destroyed by Aizen a long time ago, but in the eyes of those who saw Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu, it was no different from before. Boom boom boom. Activating his boundless eye power, he controlled Ligia Baro to blast a huge hole in the ground, and all kinds of instruments and equipment immediately came into view. With a slight thought, Ligia Baro and Dustless both jumped down. Oh, you really came here. It seems like Captain Aizen is right. Jugram has to be on guard. A man with silver hair came out of the darkness and blocked Raiji Baro. There is another person. How is it possible? You didn't die, your cells were melted by my Bankai. Ikamaru Jin suddenly realized that there was another person with Raiji Baro. He turned his head and was shocked. Captain Ikamaru Jin, since you saw me, please go to hell, I will take care of Uwanju in the future. With a sneer, Dustless didn't hesitate to sentence Ikamaru Jin to death. Chapter 11:11. The smile on Ikamaru Jin's face vanished. Hearing the bone-piercing murderous aura from Wu Chen's mouth, he couldn't help but have goosebumps. This is definitely a ruthless person who keeps his word. It's strange, isn't it? Ignoring Ikamaru Jin's cold expression, Dustless continued, a person who was supposed to be dead suddenly came back to life. No one can accept it in such a short time, but this is the truth. No one in this world can destroy me. No matter what kind of creature he is, there is no exception. His eyes emitted a domineering light. Wu Chen's entire body was shining like the stars in the sky. His eyes were sparkling. You, humph. Hearing these incomparably savage words, Ikamaru Jin was about to ridicule Dustless a few words, but when he thought of his strength that swept away everything, he fell silent again. Among the people he knew, no one was Dustless's opponent. Yamamoto was no match for him, and neither was Sosuke Aizen. Just the scene of Dustless coming back from the dead gave Jin a big fright. Leave Uwanju to me. I will help you fulfill your only wish. Dustless's murderous aura disappeared, and his voice became much softer. You have been hiding by Sosuke Aizen's side for so many years, and you want to avenge Wanju. To be honest, your loyalty is touching, but you're not strong enough to do it. That's why, you should give up on the ridiculous idea of taking revenge on Sosuke Aizen. Ikamaru Jin locked onto Dustless like a poisonous snake, and his aura surged. Hado number 88, Flying Dragon Strikes Thief. The thick beam of light came head-on, and the dark basement was incomparably bright. Wu Chen's whole body was covered by the light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. At this critical moment, Raiji Baro stood in front of Dustless, and his Ryatsu was much denser than Ikamaru Jin's. He was the captain of Yawatch's personal guard, and he was not weaker than Ikamaru Jin. Great Sage Bow. A bow the size of a normal human was formed in an instant. The dazzling spiritual arrows on the bowstring made people not dare to look at them directly. Swish. Swish. A torrential rain of arrows shot out, scattering the flashes of light in an instant. It looked very simple. Not only that, the remaining arrows were aimed at Jin Ikamaru. Seeing this, Jin couldn't help but be surprised. This was the first time he reacted to a spiritual pressure eruption. Binding Tao 81, Sky Shattering. Ikamaru Jin heaved a sigh of relief as the transparent wall blocked his attack. Caw caw caw. He had naively thought that the 88th Tao Breaker would be able to weaken the arrows without limit. Who would have thought that the 81st Tao Breaker would be so powerful that it would instantly collapse? Puchi. 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 Jin Ikamaru's arms and legs were swallowed by the spirit seed arrows. His face was pale and he looked like he was in great pain. If this guy used the Great Sage Bow himself, it might have been blocked, but I'm sorry, I'm the one controlling him from behind the scenes. Pointing at Rijibaro, Dustless said in a relaxed tone. No wonder, I thought that Quincy was a meticulous person. How could he attack Soul Society rashly? It turned out that you were the one controlling him. It seems that he was able to fight against the captain because you were controlling him from behind the scenes. Jin Ikamaru said while gasping for breath. In order to provoke the battle between Shinigami and Quincy, you really planned everything. You forced me to do this. I was tricked by Aizen and Jugram. If I didn't fight back, they would have taken a mile after taking an inch. When he mentioned Jugram and Aizen Sosuke, Dustless's killing intent exploded. Shoot him, Shinigami. While Dustless was distracted, Jin Ikamaru released his Zanpakuto without hesitation, and a huge white light rushed toward him. The speed was extremely fast, almost in the blink of an eye. Dustless had no time to react. Boom boom boom. Dustless took the fatal attack head-on, but he was unharmed, and the place where he was stabbed only flashed faintly, and quickly recovered. I suddenly realized that it's a pity to kill you like this. Since you want to avenge Matsumoto so much, then I will reluctantly fulfill your long-cherished wish. Dustless sneered, and the Rinnegan in his left eye focused on Jin Ikamaru, and a majestic spiritual power invaded Jin's mind. With a heaven-defying method, he modified his memory. It's not too late to let Jin assassinate Aizen after he squeezed the last bit of value out of him. This is also his long-cherished wish to avenge Matsumoto Ranjaku. It's time to leave. Sensing the majestic spiritual power that was crazily attacking him, the spiritual power was much stronger than the other captains. If he guessed correctly, it should be Aizen. Kamui. Dustless glanced at Rijit Baro, and decisively devoured him. This guy is a bit tricky to deal with, and he can't be killed. Once he is killed, there is a high possibility that Yawatch will use Saint to revive him in the future. You are also one of us now. After taking a deep look at Jin Ikamaru, Dustless disappeared in the dark space. He had already implanted what he was going to say in Ikamaru Jin's mind. With a little provocation, he could ignite the conflict between Aizen and Yawatch. At that time, Shinigami and Quincy, as well as Aizen, would fight again. Dustless can fish in troubled waters secretly. I can't leave so easily. In a corner of Soul Society, Dustless's cold voice sounded, as if he remembered something, and resolutely chose to stay in Soul Society. Because the so-called Wandenrake is actually hidden in the shadow of Soul Society. To put it simply, Wandenrake is actually in Soul Society. Chapter 11-12. Sosuke Aizen flew over like a rocket, leaving a deep mark in the sky that could not be erased. When he sensed the intense collision of Ryatsu, he instinctively realized that he had been tricked. Silver, tell me what's going on. Aizen's tone was 70% angry and 30% commanding. He was like a barrel of gunpowder that was about to explode. The top secret laboratory was destroyed, the data collected over the years would be damaged. All the specimens were also destroyed, including some of Aizen's most important experiments. It was a heavy loss. Quincy did it, Ikamaru Jin licked his dry lips and said after he recovered. Him. Thinking of Barrow's back, Aizen murderously asked, what's that guy doing? He must have a goal. It seems like, he's looking for Hogyoku. Ikamaru Jin paused as his memory was changed by Dustless. These words were naturally made up to trick Sosuke Aizen. It's just my personal guess. Maybe he attacked us for something else. After all, Hogyoku isn't good for Quincy. Hogyoku contains the power of Hollow and Shinigami. Hollow's power is fatal to Quincy. Ikamaru Jin said. He was obviously taking a step back. Humph. It's normal for Jugram to be scheming. Aizen believed Ikamaru Jin's words. His hoarse voice was filled with hatred for Quincy. He sneered, since Quincy dared to steal my Hogyoku, then don't blame me for being ruthless. Ikamaru Jin was surprised and asked, Captain Aizen, you mean to expose Jugram's Wandenrake? Of course. Aizen Sosuke laughed sinisterly, his tone laced with hatred. Not only will I reveal the whereabouts of Wandenrake and Jugram, I will also personally lead the head captain to exterminate those evildoers who have harmed the world. Since Quincy was willing to betray him, then even if they wanted to cut ties with him, Aizen could also abandon them. Inevitably, Aizen's words were transmitted to Dustless's mind through Ikamaru Jin's ears. Phew, it took me so much effort. It seems that Aizen is finally going to bare his fangs against Wandenrake. His perturbed heart calmed down, and Wu Chen's mouth hung a light smile like a spring breeze. Plotting against Aizen, Wandenrake, and occasionally flirting with Candace and Bambietta had become his life. Although it was boring, it was very comfortable. Without Yawatch's help, Wandenrake's destruction is only a matter of time. Wu Chen said indifferently like a breeze. His simple tone was like an insect, very casual and insignificant. Jugram was much more benevolent than Yawatch, and it was still a mystery whether his strength could surpass Yamamoto's. After taking a deep look at Quiet Soul Society behind him, Dustless disappeared. Time passed quickly, and 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During this time, Aizen secretly reported Quincy's whereabouts to Yamamoto, saying that they found him accidentally. This news shocked Yamamoto. After confirming that there was no mistake, Yamamoto decided to gather the elite Shinigami to attack Wandenrake and completely destroy them. However, it was obvious that Yamamoto was wrong. Quincy had been in Soul Society for many years, and Jugram was the first to launch an attack on the Shinigami. Of course, if possible, Jugram wanted to just let it go. However, Soul Society wouldn't let them go. The older generation of Shinigami, led by Yamamoto, almost regarded Quincy as a chronic pain. They couldn't wait to pull out their swords and immediately kill him. Now that Ligia Barrow dared to sneak attack Soul Society, Yamamoto naturally wouldn't let Quincy off easily. This was destined to be another bloody storm. TSK, what a pity. From the beginning to the end, Soul Society was the one who lost. The Shinigami couldn't take advantage of them. Dustless smacked his lips in pity. The key factor was Yawatch. Right now, these Quincy were just pawns. It did not matter if they were killed now. In the future, Yawatch could resurrect them all with just a thought. Therefore, it didn't matter if Quincy was completely wiped out. They could afford to hurt Quincy, but they couldn't afford to play with the Shinigami. They only had one life. I wanted to experience the power of omniscient and omnipotent, but time is a bit tight. I'll see next time. After sighing, Dustless quietly left and began to hunt down the members who were given the Holy Script ability by Yawatch. These people were actually Yawatch's nourishment. One day, Yawatch would extract their abilities to perfect itself. Therefore, Dustless decisively chose to implant something special in all of their bodies. When Yawatch devoured their souls, it would be a welcome gift to Yawatch. After the members of the Sternritter fell, their souls and the ability of Holy Script would all belong to Wabek. As long as Dustless placed the transcription seal in the bodies of those members in advance, everything would be fine. At the same time, in another corner of Soul Society, an unknown event was happening. There were only a few people, but the scene was extremely lively. If it weren't for the people on both sides deliberately stopping them, they would have already started fighting. Chapter 11-13. On one side was the Masquerade Corps led by Teira Masako, and on the other side was Urahara Kisuke and 4 Maple Quartz EE. Get out of my way. 8 Persimmon growled in a low voice. His eyes flickered with cold light, and his killing intent surged like a wave. Soul Society killed our companions, and they must pay with their blood. Of course, that Aizen Sosuke is no exception. Rishiori said without giving up. The other members of the Masquerade Corps were silent. Urahara Kisuke knew that silence meant agreement. I'm sorry, but I can't tolerate your actions. Now that Soul Society is going through an unprecedented disaster, I absolutely can't allow you to act recklessly. Urahara Kisuke's tone was calm and firm, expressing his stance. The members of the Masquerade Corps frowned. If possible, they didn't want to be enemies with Urahara Kisuke. After all, he saved the entire Masquerade Corps. Otherwise, all of them would have been killed long ago. Hee hee. Why do I always encounter such things? In the dark, Dustless gently observed the movements of the Masquerade Corps and couldn't help but sneer. If the Masquerade Corps also joined in, that would be great. These people were one less person to kill. Urahara Kisuke, this eyesore jumped out again. Since you want to get involved so much, I will help you. His pupils twisted sharply, and Rita Barrow once again appeared in his eyes. The cold muzzle was aimed at Urahara Kisuke. Go for me. With Dustless's roar, Rita Barrow's muzzle suddenly condensed a huge bullet. Soon after, it erupted with an aura that could destroy everything in its path. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The powerful attack stunned everyone, and they all looked in the direction where the bullet came from. Locking on to the enemy's trace, Dustless and Rita Barrow disappeared from the face of the earth. Everyone, get out of the way. Urahara Kisuke's pupils shrank, and he quickly shouted. Although he didn't know what this huge light was, it would definitely be destroyed if it hit them. Urahara Kisuke reminded everyone to retreat, and they took this opportunity to pass through Urahara Kisuke's obstruction and rush toward the center of Soul Society. It was the center of the battle between Quincy and Shinigami. Damn it. Come back. Don't go over there. Those annihilators are dangerous. Not only will they harm you, but they will also harm Soul Society. Urahara Kisuke cursed, his tone was full of anxiety, and at the same time, a huge amount of Ryatsu surged from his body. Hee hee. You're an outsider who likes to meddle in other people's business. Others going to their deaths has nothing to do with you. Dustless, who was hiding in the dark, muttered to himself. At the same time, Rinnegan turned again, focusing on Urahara Kasuk's left shoulder. Under the control of Rinnegan Sharingan, Rise Barrow once again lifted the spear in his hand, this time aiming at Urahara Kasuk. Regarding this meddlesome person, Dustless was very disgusted. Rijibaro raised his gun again. Not only that, he even used his ability, Universal Connection. There's no stage for you here. Take a break. With the cold muzzle aimed at Urahara Kasuk, Dustless didn't hesitate to order Rise Barrow to continue extracting a large number of Ryatsu. The Ryatsu in the atmosphere was rapidly extracted, quickly attracting the attention of Urahara Kasuk and Forfeige Court Uruchi. You withdraw first, I'll deal with this. Forfeige Court Uruchi decisively stood in front of Urahara Kasuk and said seriously. Yi-san, you have to pay attention. From the scale of Ryatsu extraction, the opponent should be a powerful Quincy. Urahara Kasuk lowered the brim of his hat and said cautiously. When he was about to chase after the masked core, Dustless directly ordered the beam of light to erupt. Bang bang bang. Caw caw caw. The absolute heavy blow obviously hit the person, there was a painful howl, and the sound of bones couldn't withstand the powerful force. How is this possible? The bullet bypassed me and hit Kasuk. Seeing such an unexpected scene, Forfeige Court Uruchi was stunned for a moment, and his eyes were dim. Looking at Urahara Kasuk who was suffering behind him, he felt that his brain wasn't enough. Idiot, this is the essence of connection of all things. No matter if there is something in front of you or not, anything that is targeted by Rise will be hit. Dustless sneered and looked at Rise Barrow with more and more satisfaction. No wonder Quincy calls Yawatch God every day, and this guy calls himself God's messenger. This kind of ability is indeed heaven-defying. After taking a deep look at Urahara Kasuk, Dustless quietly left, opened the tunnel to Hueco Mundo, and disappeared from the war-torn Soul Society. This was only the first step of Dustless's plan, and it was far from enough to completely kill Quincy. After all, the Sternritter Knights had 26 members, and their combined strength was almost at the captain level. It seems that this is the end. Urahara Kasuk endured the stabbing pain all over his body and looked at the disappearing figures of the masked corps. His tone was particularly bleak. They are our trump card against Sosuke Aizen. If we don't save them, we may be wiped out. Forfeige Court Uruchi supported Urahara Kasuk. Hee. I also want to stop them, but I don't have the ability now. I hope God has mercy on them. Urahara Kasuk said weakly, his body was about to fall. The bastard who provoked the war between Shinigami and Quincy is definitely not a good person. No matter who wins or loses this time, one side will be swept into the garbage heap of history. Which bastard is cursing me behind my back? If I catch him, I will definitely destroy him. On the way to Hueco Mundo, Dustless sneezed all the way. Chapter 11-14. Hueco Mundo was always so cold and bleak, a deathly silence. The sandstorm was the truest portrayal of Hueco Mundo. The boundless void distorted and a figure stepped out from it. It was a young man with delicate features and handsome features. His deep eyes were filled with wisdom and his black hair fluttered in the wind. His eyes were indifferent from the beginning to the end. However, the gentle smile at the corner of his mouth made him seem very friendly. His temperament was extremely contradictory, both good and evil. It was as if he could call you brother in 1 second and go through a mountain of swords or a sea of fire, but in the next second, he could turn hostile and stab you in the back. It was always hard to tell what he was thinking. Young master. Haribel, who had been notified in advance, called out. Her voice was very clear and pleasant. She was usually as cold as ice, but when she saw Dustless, she immediately put on a smiling face. Yo, long time no see. Dustless withdrew his indifference, and a gentle smile bloomed on his face. He had always treated those who sincerely supported him with sincerity. Voids and Shinigami were no different in his eyes. On the contrary, Dustless preferred voids because they were easy to tame. Compared to the Shinigami of Soul Society, Dustless believed that great voids were much easier to communicate with. If he showed more strength than the other party, most voids would submit. Ever since Dustless wanted to capture Eastern Sage to Soul Society, and because of Dustless's calculations, Haribel became the uncrowned king of Hueco Mundo. And because of Dustless's calculations, Sosuke Aizen trusted Haribel without a doubt, and gradually replaced Eastern Sage, who used to be his right-hand man. Sosuke Aizen was relieved to leave Hueco Mundo to Haribel. "How have you been recently?" After landing, Dustless was not in a hurry to ask about Hueco Mundo. Instead, he was very concerned about Haribel. A qualified leader should first know how to win the trust of his subordinates, and not use them without limits. A small stream flows a long stream. "I'm fine." Haribel nodded and replied calmly. Hearing this, Dustless smiled. Even though Hellable hid it very well, Dustless could still clearly see the gratitude in her trembling voice. Sosuke Aizen had never shown such concern before. "How's the thing I told you to prepare?" Changing the topic, Dustless asked, "Now that you've become the king of Hueco Mundo, you should know the people I'm talking about like the back of your hand." Dustless was talking about the great voids at the level of Vastolord, Stark, Ulquiorra, Hellable herself, and a female Vastolord. Her name was Niru. Ulquiorra and Stark are both loyal to Sosuke Aizen. I'll find an opportunity to kill them both. As for Nero, the image of a little loli appeared in his mind. Dustless said softly, "If the method is used properly, she can be pulled into our camp." In fact, Dustless didn't intend to recruit subordinates. He knew that he could defeat Shinigami by himself, but after seeing Quincy's numbers, Dustless's heart was destroyed. Not to mention anything else, Dustless didn't expect them to fight. At least, he needed a few subordinates to gather information for him. This was the most basic thing, so he didn't want to be a headless fly that had to do everything by himself. He even had to gather information by himself. A green-haired Great Void's figure appeared in Haribel's mind. She pondered, her strength is indeed good, but she hasn't betrayed Sosuke Aizen, that hateful man. Approaching her rashly might backfire. Unlike other Great Voids, Nero was very kind. Sosuke Aizen once used a trick to save her, so she was almost loyal to Sosuke Aizen, comparable to a stubborn person like Ulquiorra. Haribel. Take a long-term view. If there are no conditions, we can create them. If Sosuke Aizen can save Nero, we can also make her betray us. Dustless smiled confidently. He was a transmigrator and could predict the future. His advantage was self-evident. If he couldn't even defeat Sosuke Aizen, he might as well find a deserted place and kill himself. Haribel's eyes were shining. She said, "I understand, Master. I'll go and sneak attack her, then you come out and save her." Sosuke Aizen used this old-fashioned method to trick Nero. This old-fashioned method sometimes works, but sometimes it's self-defeating and not suitable. And Nero isn't a 3-year-old child, she'll definitely be exposed. Dustless knew that Nero hadn't been attacked by Nutla yet. Her memory and body hadn't deteriorated. She was very smart now. That's right. Dustless's eyes lit up. After Haribel's reminder, he suddenly thought of a feasible plan to drag Nero into the water. That idiot called Nutla remembered that Nero was very dissatisfied. He can use it. Dustless sneered and thought of a plan in an instant. Yes, he has always looked down on female voids. He's as arrogant as Grimjow, who was killed by Master. When mentioning Nutla, Haribel's face was cold. Amira Juches wasn't worth mentioning to her, but even so, Nutla didn't know what was good for him and deliberately provoked her. Not only did he provoke Nero, but Haribel also provoked him. She wasn't afraid of Nutla. Vastolord could easily crush Ajuchas. She was too lazy to deal with Nutla because she didn't want to cause trouble. But some people thought that this was a disguised fear, so they took advantage of it. That's just right. After using him, I'll take the opportunity to kill Nutla and purify the world. In the sandstorm, Dustless and Haribel's figures drifted and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 11:15. Los Noches Palace was dark and depressing. After Helibel became the new uncrowned king, all the big and small affairs were completely handled by her. A female void is so arrogant, one day I will kill you too. Nutla's eyes were full of greed, circling around Helibel and Nero. He was an Ajuchas, and he was fascinated by the legendary Vastolord. All voids yearned to reach that level, and the arrogant Nutla was no exception. If I devour two Vastolord, I will definitely break through the bottleneck and advance to Vastolord. His eyes were full of greed, and Nutla was daydreaming. In the vast expanse, he seemed to have seen the day he became Vastolord. In a secret room in Los Noches Palace. What did you say? How could it be? How could Aizen abandon her? That guy is Vastolord. Nutla asked with wide eyes, looking at Helibel in disbelief. His face was full of doubt, and his first thought was that Helibel deliberately lied to him. Nero is too kind, not suitable for battle. Therefore, Lord Aizen decided to abandon her, and let you secretly kill her and then devour her. Helibel repeated, her tone indifferent. These words were naturally ordered by Dustless to say by Helibel. It was very cost-effective to get rid of Nutla, an eyesore cockroach, and at the same time to pull Nero to their side. By the time Aizen realized it, his 10 blades had already been shattered into pieces, turning into nothing more than a bubble. Are you not willing? After you devour Nero, Lord Aizen will do everything to help you enter Vastolord. After all, you have the greatest potential among all the Ajuchas. Helibel said softly, her voice full of endless magic, bewitching Nutla. He seemed to be bewitched, his throat choked, and his body trembled slightly. Willing, of course I am willing. Nutla said quickly, slandering in his heart, do you think I am stupid, this kind of beautiful thing, only an idiot would not be willing. But, as if thinking of something, Nutla said unwillingly, but Nero is a real Vastolord, if she really fought seriously, I would definitely not be her opponent. Although very unhappy, Nutla had to admit that he was not Nero's opponent, the gap between the two was too big. That is your own business, the road has been pointed out, whether you can do it or not depends on your ability. Helibel said indifferently. Hearing this, Nutla's expression, and began to think about how to plot against Nero. He didn't doubt Haribel's words because Nero was that kind of person. She wasn't suited for battle and was too kind. She was the complete opposite of Hollow's nature. Therefore, Netera wouldn't be surprised if Sosuke Aizen kicked her out of the battle. The key was the method. Young master, I've already explained everything according to your method. As for Nutla's final move, I don't know. Inside Los Noches Palace, Dustless leisurely leaned on a chair, very comfortable, his face intoxicated. Don't worry, he will definitely attack Nero, I know that kind of arrogant person too well. Dustless waved his hand, indicating that Helibel did not need to worry. Nutla's mantis form was extremely arrogant, even more so than Grimjow, who was killed by Dustless before. He liked to call everyone trash. He is not reconciled, when facing Nero, he always has disdain in his heart, but he can't admit that he is not Nero's opponent, so he will use other despicable means. This is the essence of Nutla. Helibel nodded involuntarily, it was not so much the essence of Nutla, but the essence of Nutla. An evil soul like Nutla was originally born from negative emotions. Boom boom boom. A violent roar came out of nowhere, causing the entire virtual night palace to be on the verge of collapse as it swayed back and forth with creaking sounds. This spiritual pressure is Nutla's, the other, seems to be Nutla's spiritual pressure. Hannibal guessed, obviously a little sluggish. How long has it been, and Nutla can't wait to find trouble with Nero. No need to be surprised, this is very normal, everything is expected. Dustless smiled indifferently, this was the ability of a transmigrator to foresee the future, an innate advantage. Boom boom boom. Another violent wave of spiritual pressure crushed the surrounding greater voids. Nero was still fine as she had deliberately suppressed her spiritual pressure. However, Nutla's abnormal spiritual pressure swept across like a hurricane, and some of the weaker greater voids were directly crushed. Dustless and Hannibal didn't feel anything. It was like a gentle breeze. They didn't feel uncomfortable at all. Instead, they felt very cool. The only uncomfortable thing was that this cool breeze also carried an endless smell of blood, it made people uncontrollably nauseous. This is a good opportunity, find a chance to get rid of Nutla, then I will save Nero. Dustless, who was watching in the dark, sneered. He did not think that he was despicable, instead, he felt that he was unusually kind. Hannibal loyally followed Aizen Sosuke, who expected that in the end, she was instantly killed by Aizen Sosuke. Nero was probably not much stronger, so in Dustless's eyes, this was not a scheme, but a disguised redemption. Chapter 11:16. On the other side, Nero and Nutla were engaged in a fierce battle. The spiritual pressure of both sides swept across the entire Las Noches palace, causing cracks to appear in many places. However, the grand voids of Las Noches palace turned a deaf ear to this. This kind of thing was not strange. Nutla often challenged Nero, and most of the time, the results were the same. Nutla was completely defeated. After all, Nero was a Vastolord. However, the situation this time was somewhat unusual. Nero's spiritual pressure was ferocious, more than any previous time. She was serious. You dare to attack my subordinate? You bastard, you are digging your own grave. Everyone had their own bottom line, and Nero was no exception. Looking carefully, there were two grand voids leaning against the surrounding walls. There were obvious bloodstains on their bodies, and they were obviously seriously injured. Oh. Nutla went too far this time. He actually injured Nero's subordinate. This is interesting. Dustless rubbed his chin and laughed strangely. If Nero was playing with Nutla before, then this spiritual pressure that was close to going berserk showed that she was serious. Yes, Nilu values her subordinates very much. Nutla really poked a hornet's nest this time. Amir Ajuchas actually dared to anger Vastolord. I have a new understanding of his stupidity. This was simply a retard. A huge aura swept across the entire Las Noches palace. A thick energy beam spread out from Nero's body, and a destructive wave erupted. The ground was scorched, and the sky was blocked. At this moment, Nero was like a god of destruction. Damn, is this Vastolord's strength? Hateful, this damned woman did not use her full strength to deal with me before. Under this horrifying spiritual pressure, Nutla felt that he was very small and could not withstand a single blow. He was as fragile as a bug. His arrogant heart was inevitably insulted. Sneak attacking me and seriously injuring my subordinate. Even if this goes to Lord Aizen, I will not let you off easily. Nero's murderous intent was awe-inspiring. Her beautiful eyes were cold, and even the surging space around her could freeze. Go to Lord Aizen. What an idiot. Nutra laughed unscrupulously and said with disdain, "Oh right, I forgot to tell you. The person who ordered me to kill you is Sosuke Aizen." Well said. Dustless, who heard this from afar, was overjoyed and secretly gave Nutla a thumbs up. Impossible. Nero was stunned for a moment before she sneered, "You want to trick me into betraying Aizen? Are you kidding me? Do you think I'll fall for it? Too naive. You're the idiot. Sosuke Aizen is only using us as pawns. He wants us to be his pawns. Do you think your personality is suitable? You are too merciful, so you must be removed. Nutra laughed wildly. His laughter was full of sarcasm. Seeing that Nero was silent, he continued to attack her bluntly. Look at our fight. We have already destroyed Las Noches, and no one has stopped us. This shows that you have been abandoned. When these words fell into Nero's ears, it was even more serious than being cut several times in a row. She clenched her fists tightly. Humph. Aizen said that as long as I kill you, I can devour you, and he will help me advance to Vastolord. At the end of his speech, Nutra almost danced with joy. The person who actually said these words was Hellable, but Nutra, who discriminated against women, didn't even say Hellables' name. Anyway, Hellable was just a messenger. At the same time, a mysterious shadow swept into the air, and the sharp Zanpakuto slashed directly at Niru. Pucci. Caught off guard, Niru was immediately seriously injured, and the bone mask on her forehead was crushed by the ferocious blade. Her face turned pale, and she suddenly spat out a big mouthful of blood. But the most surprising thing was that Niru's Ryatsu fluctuations gradually decreased, like a deflated ball, and the majestic Ryatsu in her body dissipated in an instant. No wonder he is so confident, he actually conspired with others. Hellable's face changed, and she looked at Niru with a bit of self-blame in her eyes. As a female Greater Void, and Vastolord, the two of them had a good personal relationship. Enough, you go and stop the Greater Void reinforcements, leave these two to me. Looking at the figure who attacked Niru, Dustla stepped out and disappeared like a hurricane. The pink Greater Void, called Arsaporo, was also one of the future 10 Blades. His strength was good, especially 200 years ago, he was said to be Vastolord. Later, for some reason, his soul was divided into two and he was demoted to the current Ajuches. I'm coming. Seeing this, Nutra was overjoyed, and he quickly rushed toward Niru. At this moment, her Ryatsu dissipated, and she was at her most vulnerable. Pucci. A golden light flashed, and Nutra's face turned pale, and he was shocked to find that his arms were cut off by the light. The light condensed, and Dustlass's figure appeared. Looking at Niru, who was on the verge of collapse, Dustlass stepped forward. Dustlass breathed a sigh of relief and gave Niru a comforting look. Phew, fortunately, she's fine, just some superficial wounds, no big deal. Who are you? The pink-haired Arsaporo asked. Looks like a Grim Reaper. But you dared to break into Las Noches Palace alone. Even if you are a Grim Reaper, you will die. Hearing this, Dustlass stared coldly at Nutra. This meddlesome Ajuches was beyond his expectations, and Niru was injured. It's you two who should die. Chapter 11:17. His deep eyes spun, and a murderous glint flashed. Nutla and Sal Apollo's hearts skipped a beat. They knew that things were not going well. Those ferocious red eyes seemed to want to annihilate their souls. They were in extreme pain as if they were being burned by the invisible fire of the Red Lotus. They were almost melting. Nutla and Sal Apollo saw this and took a step back. Even though Dustlass did not have any Ryatsu fluctuations, his glance was enough to make them tremble in fear. The two of them could not help but break out in cold sweat. Bastard! After taking a step back, Nutla, who realized what had happened, was shocked and angry. If there were not so many people around, he would have slapped himself. He was so scared by a person's gaze that he kept retreating, unable to resist. Just thinking about it made Nutla's whole body explode. What kind of humiliation was this? The sword of the Grim Reaper can't hurt me. Among the 10 blades, my steel skin is the hardest. Nutla laughed arrogantly. And I have this ability. The arms that were cut off by Dustless suddenly emitted a strange reiatsu fluctuation. Immediately, the severed arms quickly regenerated. So, what are you trying to say? Dustless was not moved. He asked indifferently, don't talk about super regeneration and steel skin, these two shallow abilities. Even if you have the ability to resurrect the dead, you are still doomed to die. You said my ability is shallow. Nutla was stunned. He immediately laughed out of anger and said, is that so? Then I will let you understand what it means to defy the natural order. The word shocking is a true description of me. After saying that, Nutla waved his horrifying weapon and stabbed. His speed was so fast that only a black afterimage could be seen. Even because the sand was too soft, the place where he passed by set off a storm. You are short-sighted. Do you really think that Arankars are invincible? Don't be ridiculous. Don't say that you are just an Ichuka's Arankar. Even if you are a Vastolord, in fact, you are just a so-so. Dustless sneered. The so-called Vastolord was actually very fragile. At least in Dustless's eyes, it could be destroyed with a flick of his finger. For some Captain-class Shinigami, Vastolord was just as vulnerable. For example, Aizen Sosuke could suppress a jutsus with Reiatsu alone. He could kill Vastolord with one strike. Dustless was even less of a problem. At this moment, the sky suddenly darkened. Dustless suddenly looked up and saw a figure wielding a large saber descending from the sky. The force of his falling body was like a mountain that weighed hundreds of tons. Go away. This guy is very strong. Seeing Dustless looking at the sky like he was possessed, the kind-hearted Nero quickly reminded him. However, if she knew that the person who had planned all of this was Dustless, her heart would probably be so depressed that she would vomit blood. Leave. Why should I leave? Hueco Mundo doesn't belong to their family. Glancing at Nero indifferently, Dustless remained calm. The chakra in his body surged, and a giant Tengu was formed in the blink of an eye. Ken Susanoo. Following Wu Chen's command, the golden light turned from virtual to real. The thick arm clenched tightly, and a super-large fist blasted out. This. What the hell is this? Nutla roared with a sharp tone. His eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets as he looked at the oncoming golden Daquan, which was almost the size of a small mountain. Feeling the penetrating sharpness of the fist, he quickly blocked his weapon in front of his chest. Bang! Under the control of his mind, the thick fist blasted into Nutla without any accident. The powerful force could destroy heaven and earth, and Nutla disappeared in an instant. Hundreds of meters away. Nutla was lying on the ground in a sorry state. His bones were shattered, and only his internal organs and head were intact. The rest of his body had been crushed. What kind of monster is that? Lifting his head with difficulty, he saw the terrifying Tengu armor, sensed the heart-palpitating power, and the injuries all over his body. Nutla's self-esteem collapsed in an instant. I must tear you apart alive, I must. Nutla gnashed his teeth and said hatefully, revealing a hysterical madness in his words. Listening to this determined tone, it seemed that he wanted to perish together with Dustless. However, he didn't have the chance. Dustless turned into a rainbow light, illuminating a large area of Las Noches Palace. The dazzling light made people not dare to look at him directly. What does this guy want to do? Nutla was stunned. Looking at Dustless, who had turned into a flash of light, a hint of fear instinctively flashed in his eyes. He quickly used all the strength in his body to activate super regeneration. He instinctively felt that something was wrong. Are you still going to struggle? But it doesn't matter. You're lucky that your internal organs weren't destroyed just now. This time, I'll crush your entire body. With a sinister smile, the light gathered in Dustless's hand swarmed out. The moment it appeared, it almost covered the entire sky. Yasukani no Magatama. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Thousands of sharp piercing sounds made people shudder. Nudla stared blankly at the falling light bullets. His face was ashen, and the idea of super regeneration was put down. Bang bang bang. Not only Nudla's body, but the earth was also affected by the most ruthless and cruel radiance. Countless holes were dug out, and almost half of Las Noches Palace was filled with holes. As for Nudla, his body was crushed into powder, and the stench of a foreign species was still lingering. Life and death were completely destroyed. Not to mention continuing to fight with Dustless, Nudla didn't even leave behind a corpse. Chapter 11:18. Nilu's eyes widened when she saw this scene. Her pupils dilated several times. She was horrified and shocked. She stared at Dustless in surprise as if she was looking at a prehistoric monster. Her eyes refused to move at all. He killed Nudla in just 2 moves. Oh my god, am I dreaming? Nero murmured to herself. She knew that she could easily defeat Nudla, but she was far from being able to defeat someone as simple as Dustless. It was completely overwhelming strength. No, it was completely using the strength of a super dimension to instantly kill Nudla. The two sides were completely incomparable. Strange, when did such a person appear in Hueco Mundo? Nero's eyes glowed, and her face showed deep curiosity. Sal Apollo's face was full of disgust. In terms of strength, Nudla was still above him. Although he used to be Vastolord, that was almost 200 years ago. Right now, he was just a weak Ajuches. Nudla was the best example. He did not even have the time to release his blade before he was killed by Dustless. Only 2 moves. No, only 1 move. In Sal Apollo's view, the last move, Yasukani no Magatama, was completely unnecessary. It was just a casual move, and he did not even make a move, but Nudla was instantly crippled. How do you feel? After approaching Nero and seeing that she was safe and sound, Dustless smiled and said, "This is just a small injury. There is no need to worry about it." Nero nodded and looked at Dustless gratefully. She solemnly thanked him and said, "If it wasn't for you, I would have been killed by those 2 despicable guys." And Nero's eyes rolled around Dustless. She said in surprise, "It is really rare to see a greater void like you." Void? Hearing this, Dustless shook his head helplessly in his heart, thinking that Nero was really kind and naive. Idiot, he's not a void. He's a Grim Reaper through and through. Therill said cautiously. He unsheathed his Zanpakuto and aimed it at Dustless. "Let's put our personal grudges aside and work together to kill this Shinigami. Since you are loyal to Aizen, you should know that his enemy is the Shinigami." It would have been better if Sal Apollo had not said anything. Now that Sal Apollo had mentioned it, Nero was instantly enraged. The majestic spiritual pressure that had disappeared earlier was now completely restored, and it pressed down on Sal Apollo with an overwhelming force. The waves were endless like the sea, wave after wave, and they were endless. Caw caw caw. Unable to withstand the destructive and suffocating spiritual pressure, visible cracks began to appear on the steel skin on Sal Apollo's body. "Aizen. I want to kill him." Nero's words were shocking. She turned her head to look at her subordinates who were in a terrible state, and her dormant killing intent erupted. People have reverse scales, those who touch them will die. Now that Sosuke Aizen indiscriminately sent people to kill her, Nero naturally wouldn't just sit there and wait for death. TSK. It seems that my efforts were not in vain. I'll have to provide free labor in the future. Dustless said happily. Looking at Nero's hateful expression, He sighed that women were indeed creatures who could distinguish between kindness and hatred. Towards betrayers, they all harbored a deep-seated hatred. Of course, betrayal was actually nonsense. It was just that Dustless had plotted against Neutra once. Caw caw caw. The void instantly twisted into a whirlpool, and a pink light appeared. The extremely dense energy fluctuation attracted Dustless and Nero's attention. Is this Wang Su's flash? Nero's pretty face was extremely ugly, and crystal-clear beads of sweat fell from her forehead. Normally, she would not be afraid, but now, she was powerless to deal with it. She involuntarily looked at Dustless. Thinking of his exaggerated strength, Nero calmed down a lot. Dustless was far stronger than her, so destroying Void Flash was naturally a piece of cake for him. It was just a small matter. Go to hell, you two eyesores. Feral Apollo said hatefully. He exerted his Ryatsu, and the pink Void Flash grew bigger and bigger. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The light that had reached the bottleneck gushed out, directly crushing Dustless and Nero. Its power was extremely powerful. Everything that was covered by the pink light was distorted, and even the passing wind and sand were forced to change their trajectory. Boom boom boom. The moment the energy sphere appeared, it turned into a thick beam of light. Dustless and Nero were not worth mentioning. They were so small that they could be easily killed with a flick of a finger. Scared out of your wits? Serves you right. This is the Wang Su's flash that I used with all my strength, so its power is naturally extraordinary. It's normal for me to be afraid. Neutra smiled proudly, and his smile was very arrogant. You're mistaken. Dustless shook his head and denied it lightly. I didn't dodge not because I was scared out of my wits, but because there was no need to dodge at all. You want me to escape? You don't deserve it. Then, under Feral Apollo's shocked gaze, Dustless slowly raised his right arm and swept it up, hitting the incoming Void Flash head-on. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The Void Flash that was powerful enough to destroy the sky was suddenly forced to change its trajectory and swept toward the sky. It was casually slapped away by Dustless. How is this possible? I must have forgotten to bring my eyes when I came out in a hurry, and my old eyes must be seeing things. Feral Apollo gasped and said in a daze. His tone became abnormally slow, and his eyes were fixed on Dustless. Especially when he saw that Dustless looked as if nothing had happened, he was even more certain of his thoughts. It was definitely an illusion. Chapter 11-19. Sal Apollo's face alternated between red and purple as he clenched his fists tightly. Whether it was an illusion or a dream, he had to admit that the Dustless in front of him was a super god. Damn it, if I'm dreaming, it should be my dream. Why is he so strong in my dream? This isn't fair. Sal Apollo cursed in his heart. He felt powerless, and even though he tried to suppress the fear in his heart, his pale face betrayed him. This was the first time he had witnessed such a miraculous scene. Flash had sent Wang Su flying with a single hand. Boom! 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 At the same time, a deafening roar came from the sky, and a pink light covered the sky within a few kilometers, creating a large vacuum. TSK. If this Void Flash didn't explode, you would have thought that I did something to it. No, you would have thought that you overslept. Looking at the dumbfounded Sal Apollo, Dustless teased. While speaking, his words were full of sarcasm and disdain. Don't be so smug. Hearing this, Sal Apollo's face changed greatly. He had always thought of himself as superior, so how could he stand being mocked by Dustless? He was the most outstanding scientist in Hueco Mundo, and no one had ever dared to speak to him in such a disdainful tone. Even Sosuke Aizen spoke to him as if he was equal. He's very strong, and his body is very unusual. Be careful. Seeing Dustless's arrogance, Nero had to remind him, he's not as simple as he looks on the surface. I remember that about 200 years ago, he was a complete Vastolord. Later, for some reason, his soul suddenly split into two, and his strength fell to a jutches. Humph. It's too late to say anything now. This blind death has angered this genius. He must pay the price to appease my anger, his life. Seeing that Nero had revealed his identity, Sal Apollo immediately clamored. His arrogance made it seem as if he would kill even the King of Heaven. I know. Dustless nodded. His next words made Nero and Sal Apollo vomit blood. He said, if it weren't for the lack of time, I would have dissected him and observed him. His soul can be divided into two. He's not simple. Dustless's tone was full of praise. To be able to split one's soul into two independent existences, he knew that he could not do it. He was somewhat impressed by Sal Apollo. You want to dissect me? Thar Apollo ignored all the **t that Thar Apollo had spouted. Thar Apollo's handsome face was contorted as he roared, even if your head captain is here, he won't be able to save you, you bastard. Dustless's eyelids didn't even twitch when he felt the murderous aura coming at him. He directly ignored it. After glaring at Dustless fiercely, Sal Apollo suddenly took out a bottle of medicine. Dustless looked at it coldly and put it to his mouth. Stop him. Nero hurriedly urged Dustless, Sal Apollo is a mad scientist. His research will definitely change the outcome of this battle. Let him do what he wants. Dustless was indifferent. He said nonchalantly, I'm looking forward to seeing what effect the medicine will have on him. Nero didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was sure that after Sal Apollo swallowed the pill, his strength would at least increase by a few dimensions. Kakik. Ha ha ha, Sal Apollo roared with arrogant laughter. Then, a majestic spiritual pressure seemed to descend from the sky. It was so oppressive that it was difficult to breathe. Nero looked at Sal Apollo in horror. Suddenly, a terrifying thought flashed through her mind. Could it be that he has recovered all his strength from before? Looking at Sal Apollo, Nero's eyes flashed with astonishment. She could clearly feel that Sal Apollo's spiritual pressure was rapidly expanding, surpassing her at her peak. After all, Sal Apollo was Vastolord more than 200 years ago. I really don't know what you are afraid of. Just because he is Vastolord and has recovered his peak strength. Don't just limit your vision to Vastolord. Set your sights higher. There are many existences in this world that are stronger than Vastolord. For example, Sosuke Aizen, who you used to work for. Dustless explained calmly, turning a deaf ear to the immense spiritual pressure emanating from Sal Apollo. TSK. Don't tell me you are at the same level as Sosuke Aizen. Sal Apollo sneered. His eyes were full of arrogance. He closed his eyes and felt the spiritual pressure in his body. The trump card is usually used last. This is the price you have to pay for angering me. With a sneer, Sal Apollo took a step forward. He was as fast as lightning, and then he attacked. So fast. Nero was shocked. She could only see a faint afterimage. That exaggerated speed was beyond her detection ability. Whoosh! In an instant, the storm suddenly disappeared. It evaporated into thin air. She couldn't sense the spiritual pressure anymore. Where did he go? Nero's expression changed. She was on guard. She looked around and focused on searching for Sal Apollo's spiritual pressure. Behind your body, Dustless reminded her indifferently. Nero was stunned when she heard that. She turned around and saw Sal Apollo. TSK. Death God, your reaction is quite fast. Sal Apollo, who was behind him, was surprised. Then, he mocked arrogantly, "But you still have to die." "Bastard, when did it start?" At that moment, a sharp pain suddenly spread throughout his body. Sal Apollo screamed. Chapter 11:20. Sal Apollo was shocked. Following his line of sight, one could clearly see that there was a golden sword stabbed into his abdomen. It was sharp, and the blade was emitting a dazzling golden light. Just looking at it would cause one to feel a stabbing pain in one's eyes. It was Dustless's personal artifact, the sword of heavenly clouds condensed from the glint fruit. "When did this happen?" "I didn't see you do anything," Sal Apollo murmured as his monstrous body trembled. "When?" This sentence and this question are too funny. Dustless was very calm, and then he sneered in disdain. "Indeed, as you said, I didn't do anything. You were the one who foolishly bumped into me." Ha! These words made Nero laugh. Looking at Sal Apollo's flushed face, she felt particularly happy. "Stop bullshitting me." Sal Apollo's face turned red as he quibbled. His suffocating and despairing aura locked onto Dustless, and a beast-like ferocious glint flashed in his eyes. Or it could be said that he was an out-and-out beast. His whole body was covered with a thick bloody light. Enduring the pain all over his body, he forced himself to retreat. Every time he moved, his body would be in extreme pain. "This damn thing is still hot." Sal Apollo was in unbearable pain. The scorching light of the sword of heavenly clouds was eroding his body. His internal organs were scorched, and his life force was reduced without limit. "Bastard!" Sal Apollo said fiercely, and his sharp roar sounded like he wanted to cut Dustless into pieces. "Seeing that you are in so much pain, I will be a good person and help you." Looking at Sal Apollo, who was trying to break free from the sword of heavenly clouds but was in so much pain that his whole body was cold, Dustless chuckled, and his left eye suddenly turned white. The Tensigan descended. He gently raised his right hand and aimed at Sal Apollo's abdomen, and the chakra in his body began to dance. "What? You want to hit me with such an ordinary fist? Do you think I am a human?" "No, this kind of ordinary fist can't even kill a human, let alone me, who was a top-grade Void Realm expert of Vasto Lord 200 years ago." Looking at the ordinary fist, Sal Apollo expressed his disdain. The corner of his mouth curled up into a mocking smile. "Is that so? Then please give it a try." Dustless smiled strangely, and the Tensigan rotated rapidly, injecting all the eye power into his fist. Bang bang bang. An unparalleled repulsive force exploded, instantly blowing up half of Sal Apollo's body, leaving only the lower half. "Oh. I wanted to play with you until the end, but it seems like I used too much strength," Dustless said with a face full of self-blame. "You bastard!" The roaring sound came from all directions, and the indignant voice lingered in Wu Chen's ears for a long time without dispersing. "Still alive. That's great." Then, to Nero's astonishment, Sal Apollo, who only had half of his body left, began to release spiritual pressure and slowly formed a new body. How is this possible? How can he be reborn after his heart and head were destroyed? Nero was shocked. This was the first time she had seen such a situation. This is normal. This guy was Vasto Lord 200 years ago, and it is normal for him to find ways to improve his strength or his physical ability. Don't forget that he is a scientist, and it is normal for him to invent some strange things. Dustless explained calmly. After all, he was Vasto Lord, and it was normal for him to have some trump cards. "Are you saying that my invention is a strange thing?" Sal Apollo was furious. Voidness was composed of negative emotions, and except for a few individuals, many people were easily angered. "How dare you say that such a great invention is strange?" This is blasphemy. Sal Apollo roared with all his might. Then, he declared proudly, my body, after decades of modification, has far surpassed the ability of super regeneration. Even if there is only a tiny bit of flesh or a single cell left, I can recover it. Sal Apollo was extremely arrogant and acted as if he was invincible. This made Nero frown. If what Sal Apollo said was true, then this guy had an immortal body and could be said to be invincible. Is that so? Thank you for your reminder. Dustless's spiritual pressure and chakra were all extinguished, and he thanked Sal Apollo seriously. Soon after, the corners of his mouth lifted slightly, revealing a terrifying arc. Since you've told me your weakness, then I'll shatter your entire body. Truth-seeking jade. She waved her hand, and a black ball the size of a fist appeared. Bah! Are you trying to scare me? Childish. Seeing this, Sal Apollo smiled disdainfully. How could such a thing destroy him? He waved his hand and said, come at me if you dare. I promise I won't dodge. Then, please go to hell. Dustless said coldly. With a thought, the truth-seeking jade instantly enlarged by hundreds of times, turning into a large ball and swallowing Sal Apollo, who was unaware of it. He didn't even have time to scream before he disappeared. Now, except for Baligan, the king of Hueco Mundo, who was killed by Dustless last time, there was one less Vasto Lord. Won't Aizen Sosuke vomit blood from depression? Dustless thought to himself. Baligan had been killed, and so had Grimjow, and Nutla just now, and Sal Apollo were no exception. Hellable used to be Dustless's secret chess piece, and now Nero had been betrayed by him. Aizen Sosuke's 10 blades were in pieces. Chapter 11:21. The tip of the truth-seeking ball annihilated Sal Apollo. He was too careless to fight back, or rather, he didn't care at all. No one would have thought that such an ordinary-looking little sphere would be so terrifying. It was able to turn everything it came into contact with into ashes. The strangeness of it surpassed any of the techniques used in the world. Nero had never seen such a shocking trick before. She knew that Sosuke Aizen couldn't do it. She keenly felt that the ball didn't have Ryatsu. It was made of a special kind of energy. She had never seen it before. How is this possible? Nero's eyes widened, and her mouth opened so wide that a fist could fit in it. She was so shocked that her whole body was numb. The eyes that looked at Wuchen were filled with obvious changes. They were filled with blind worship and respect. Hueco Mundo was a place where the strong were respected. If you were strong, you were the boss. If you weren't strong enough, you could only be bullied. Aizen was a Shinigami who could ride on top of all the grand voids because of his unprecedented strength. That's the best. It'll be easier to fool them. Seeing this, Dustless smiled and deliberately said, that bastard Sosuke Aizen is really hateful. He even betrayed his own subordinates. After saying this, Dustless looked at Nero's half-dead subordinates. I will kill him. Nilu said with hatred. She looked at the subordinate officials with red eyes. She looked like she was about to cry, and I felt pity for her. However, it's a pity that you can't kill him in this state. Sosuke Aizen's strength is second to none in Soul Society. Even the so-called Vasto Lord can't withstand a single move from him. Dustless deliberately said, obviously raising Sosuke Aizen's strength. He said, maybe you don't know, but in Soul Society, even the head captain doesn't dare to underestimate him. Hearing this, Nero's face fell, and the fire of hatred gradually extinguished. At the end of the void was Vasto Lord. It was obvious that this was the end for her. But, the sudden words made Nero stunned. She was very nervous and excited. She looked at Wuchen with eager eyes. He was her only life-saving straw. His watery appearance was quite cute. Isn't it a bit too much to fool her like this? Dustless felt strange. Nero was sincerely wiping her mouth, but then he remembered Sosuke Aizen's actions and shook his head resolutely. This was not a trick, this was his mother's redemption. Vasto Lord is the fixed point of nothingness, but it is not the end point of Erincore shattering. Hogyoku can only remove part of the mask on your body, so Erincore shattering actually has the possibility of improvement. Wuchen explained with a chuckle, his tone was extremely certain. At this moment, a golden rainbow rushed over. 1,000 meters, 100 meters, 10 meters. Its speed was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it was infinitely close to Nirvana and Dustless. It's you. Her pupils constricted, and after seeing who it was, she said warily, Hellable. Are you here to kill me as well? Of course not. Before Hellable could speak, Dustless interrupted, in fact, she's one of my people. Her purpose is to spy on Sosuke Aizen. Her cold and calm tone made it seem as if she was narrating a trivial matter. How did you do it? Hearing this, Neru's eyes lit up. Now, Hellable was the uncrowned king. Sosuke Aizen left everything to Hellable, which showed his trust in her. Who would have thought that Hellable was a spy? Dustless was a Shinigami, but from the current situation, he was not an enemy. I helped Hellable remove her mask. Dustless said to Nero with endless temptation, it's actually very simple, but also very difficult. At least in this world, I'm the only one who can do it. Hellable also instantly took off her mask. Her snow-white skin was exposed, and her huge meatball swayed. She didn't care about Dustless's existence. Damn. It's even bigger than my head, this feeling, tsk. Wuchen was dazzled for a while. His eyes were dazzled. If it weren't for Nilou in front of him, he really wanted to experience how it felt. Nero's eyes flashed with desire. Although Hellable's important subordinates were exposed, she didn't care. For Shulai, this kind of trivial matter was not worth mentioning. Growing up in an environment where the strong preyed on the weak, they only pursued power. Greetings, my lord. Nero immediately knelt in front of Dustless to show her loyalty. She naturally knew why Dustless wanted to do this. Get up, Sosuke Aizen is our enemy. Dustless chuckled and immediately raised his hand to help her up. Nero was slightly moved. Sosuke Aizen would not do this. Bring your subordinates here, I can restore them. Looking at Nero's dying subordinates, Dustless wanted to be a good person to the end. Of course, to be precise, he wanted to win people's hearts. Super regeneration was not an ability that every Shulai had. Nero's subordinates did not have this ability, so their bodies were destroyed and they could only wait for death. This kind of problem was very tricky for Nilou, but it was just a small matter to Dustless. There was no problem at all. Thank you, my lord. Nero was grateful and her tone was unusually excited. It's rare to see a great Shulai like you. Dustless sighed with a thought-provoking tone. Nero was the only one in Hueco Mundo who would put down her face to beg for help for her subordinates. However, perhaps this was why she was so cute. Chapter 11:22. Nero was filled with respect and admiration for Dustless. Perhaps it was because they were both rare females, or because they were both Vastolord, but she often interacted with her libel and knew her personality. Now that Dustless could pull this female iceberg to his side, Nero was surprised. Also, because of her libel, she felt a sense of belonging to Dustless. After all, they were both Vastolord, and they shared a common language. Sir, wait. Don't call me sir, call me young master. Dustless's face was stern, and his tone was firm. It was as if he would turn hostile if Nero called him sir again. Nero was stunned and subconsciously looked at her libel. The latter helplessly shook her head and frowned. Dustless's habit also gave her a headache. You children don't understand the world of adults, and don't ask too much. In short, don't call me sir, Dustless said with an unfathomable look. That's because everyone who calls me sir is a traitor. Wu Chen secretly complained in his heart. He immediately looked at Nero, who wanted to say something, and asked, "What's the matter? Tell me." Nero nodded and asked, "What's the next step of our plan? Are we going to kill Sosuke Aizen?" These words attracted Hurlabel's attention, and she eagerly looked at Dustless. "It's still too early," Dustless replied. The two women's eyes dimmed, and they seemed disappointed. After all, Sosuke Aizen was their mortal enemy. As for her libel, you can stay in Hueco Mundo. As for Nero, Dustless's eyes fell on Nero and circled her for a moment. He suddenly made a decision and said, "You will stay with me for the time being. There are still many things I need you to do." Nero didn't say anything. At the same time, the fierce battle in Soul Society continued. Although Yawatch himself didn't appear, the battle was still earth-shattering. The eyes of both sides were red with killing intent as they fiercely fought back and forth. The entire Quiet Soul Society was severely attacked and turned into a pile of ruins. Not only that, the scale of the war gradually spreading to the entire Soul Society. Blood dyed the ground red, and the air was filled with the pungent smell of blood. At a certain border area. Dow Breaker 90, Black Coffin. The razor-sharp black lights attacked from all directions. There were so many of them that it was not as simple as tens of thousands. All of them attacked the blonde man. Pucci. 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 The black light engulfed the golden-haired man's body, mercilessly slicing his body. Countless flashing blades attacked him together. However, he couldn't hurt him at all. His expression remained cold and indifferent from the beginning until the end. He was like a towering statue, and his handsome face seemed to have been frozen forever. There wasn't a trace of expression on his face. Sosuke Aizen. How dare you betray us? The golden-haired man raised his head and stared at the person who attacked him. His unchanging face finally had some expression. However, it was filled with cold killing intent. This person was the current leader of Wandenrake, Jugram. Because Yawatch was sealed, he was given the ruler's mask, and had been in charge of Wandenrake's affairs. At the same time, he was the next king and the leader of the Sterncross Knights. I betrayed you. As if he heard the funniest joke in the world, Sosuke Aizen almost laughed out loud. At the same time, he was extremely angry. He no longer concealed his killing intent and erupted like a tide. Your subordinate, the Quincy master called Li Jiabero, ambushed Silver and dared to target my Hingyu. You still dare to say that I betrayed you? Preposterous. Are all of you so shameless? Sosuke Aizen said angrily. His eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Jugram, his heart filled with anger. He had always been the one scheming against others, but this time, he was tricked by Jugram. Rita, hearing this, Jugram was extremely gloomy. His eyes flashed with anger. In reality, he still didn't understand the situation. Originally, he ordered Rita Barrow to deal with the traitors in the modern world, Candace and Bambieta. Who would have thought that not only would he not return, he would even recklessly attack Soul Society. The most hateful thing was that he had revealed the secret of Wandenrake for 1,000 years. What made Jugram want to vomit blood was that this was in front of head Captain Yamamoto. Left with no choice, Jugram could only order all the members of Wandenrake to attack. Only then would they have the initiative. I have nothing to say about Rita Barrow, but it is a fact that you provided head Captain Yamamoto with information about Wandenrake. Jugram didn't reply. He still couldn't find Ritabaro. He dared to have ideas about Hogyoku, so it is normal for me to betray you. Sosuke Aizen didn't care. He looked at Jugram with a burning desire to fight. Stop talking nonsense, let me see how different you are as the leader of a knight regiment. Aizen's Ryatsu shot out a cold light, and his Ryatsu surged. He pounced on Jugram, intending to start a fierce battle. Serves you right, you two idiots who always think that you are infallible better die. Ever since the last lesson, Sosuke Aizen always hit Hogyoku on his body in case he was unprepared. These words naturally fell into Hogyoku's ears, or Dustless who was disguised as Hogyoku's consciousness. Chapter 11:23. Dustless was the one who secretly instigated this war. His goal was to get rid of the Wandless Empire that was hiding in the dark. Only by crushing them could Dustless be at ease. After all, this Colossus was even stronger than the Grim Reaper. Dustless could still clearly remember that when he fought against Squad Zero, Urabaker's 4 personal guards had crushed them with overwhelming strength. That's right, it was an instant kill. The most shocking thing was that when he fought against Head Captain Yamamoto, although Urabaker had used a trick to get rid of him, it was enough to show Urabaker's foresight. Not only was he strong, but he was also unparalleled in wisdom. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 3 days had passed. In Kangsa City in the modern world, Candace and Bambietta had been waiting for Dustless for a long time. After all, Dustless was now equivalent to their boss. But what made the 2 girls stomp their feet was that when Dustless returned home, he brought back a woman with a voluptuous figure, Nero. Hey. I just have one more subordinate. Do you two need to be like this? On the sofa, Dustless looked at the 2 girls in front of him helplessly. Candace and Bambietta were looking at Dustless unkindly. Candace, in particular, seemed to be emitting lightning from her body. You're just satisfying your own selfish desires. Bambietta grumbled unhappily. She was very dissatisfied with Nero's appearance. Selfish desires. Hearing this, Dustless stared blankly. After thinking for a long time, he still couldn't understand what they were talking about. He couldn't help but ask curiously, forgive me for being blunt, but the selfish desires you're talking about are, gulp. Dustless suddenly understood what the 2 girls meant. He smiled bitterly and said, don't tell me you two think I brought Nero back to satisfy my own desires. Dustless asked with a dark expression. Nero was not bad. She had the face and the figure, but he wasn't the kind of person who couldn't move when he saw a woman. Isn't that the case? Do you think you can hide your wild ambitions from the 2 of us? Stop joking around. Sometimes, you're just a pervert. Bambietta sneered. Sometimes, you're just a pervert. Bullshit. Dustless cursed in his heart. When he brought Nero back, he really didn't think in that direction. If I don't teach the 2 of you a lesson, you won't know how powerful I am. In the future, you might even go overboard and accuse me. Dustless thought to himself as he looked at the 2 overbearing women. Dustless seemed to have thought of something as he let out a chilling laugh from his throat, causing the souls of the 2 women to tremble. What do you want? Looking at Dustless's green eyes, the 2 girls glanced at each other and instinctively felt that something was amiss. They said in unison, I advise you not to have any crooked thoughts, otherwise. The 2 of you once said that as long as Wandless Empire collapses, I can do whatever I want to the 2 of you, right? Dustless dragged out his words as he asked maliciously. Hearing this, Candace and Bambietta were stunned. Back then, when they were forced into a corner and were about to be destroyed by Quincy, they did say that. Now that Wandless Empire is fighting with the Death God, it's only a matter of time before it collapses. Now, the 2 of you can redeem your promise. Back then, the two of you said that you would be my slaves. Dustless smiled as he looked at the two women's delicate bodies. About that, hearing this, the two women's faces flushed red. Candace argued with a red face, Wanless Empire hasn't been destroyed yet, so it doesn't count. That's right. Bambietta nodded. You're twisting words and forcing logic. Dustless curled his lips in disdain as his gaze fell on Bambietta. Staring at her sparkling eyes and curvaceous body, he took advantage of her carelessness and pulled her into his arms. You're an exception. You lost the bet back then, so you've been my maid for a long time. Dustless said with a smile as he blew hot air into Bambietta's ear. Serving her young master in bed is also one of the duties of a maid, isn't it? You. Bambietta's face flushed red as a strange emotion spread through her. Especially the scorching aura from Wu Chen's body, as well as the faint smell of sweat, it caused her mind to be in a mess. Little Bambietta, just obey him. Seeing that Dustless was only circling around Bambietta, Candace relaxed and said with a smile, You're his maid anyway. You're right. Dustless gave her a look of praise, then looked at Candace who was beaming with joy. Feeling rather displeased, he said in a strange tone, I don't want someone who offers herself to me. She probably stinks of sweat. She smells as good as you. Taking advantage of Bambietta's distraction, Dustless pecked her perfect face at lightning speed. So good. So smooth. Bambietta was dumbfounded. She subconsciously touched her face that was still stained with saliva and was instantly petrified. You. Candace was even more furious. She naturally understood that Wu Chen's eccentric voice was mocking her behind her back. He actually mocked her for stinking of sweat. It was difficult for Candace to remain calm. Just as the two women were about to explode in anger, a powerful spiritual pressure invaded them like a basin of cold water that extinguished their flames. Even Dustless frowned and restrained his playfulness. This spiritual pressure was extremely powerful, but it was not hostile. Instead, it deliberately lowered its spiritual pressure when it arrived to show its friendliness. Chapter 11:24. Dustless's playful heart gradually extinguished as he carefully sensed the changes in spiritual pressure. He could not help but be surprised because he felt that this abnormal spiritual pressure was very familiar. He had encountered it before. Who could it be? Dustless murmured, frowning as he thought to himself. It should be a powerhouse you once knew. The other party deliberately lowered his spiritual pressure as a gesture of goodwill. Otherwise, he would have already killed his way in. Candace showed her rare wise side as she analyzed carefully. Although the other party deliberately lowered his spiritual pressure and controlled it very skillfully, it's obvious that he has undergone years of training. He's obviously a captain-level Grim Reaper. No matter who he is, if he doesn't know what's good for him, I don't need to reason with him. Dustless stretched his waist lazily. No matter who the other party was, there was no need to care. If it was go against the current, he could just kill him. Soul Society was now in a mess anyway, and no one would care about what happened in the modern world. Candace and Bambietta looked at each other and fell silent. After all, Dustless was their boss, and now that their strength had been taken away, they would only be a hindrance, so they simply chose to turn a deaf ear. I hope I didn't choose the wrong person. Outside the villa, a middle-aged man with a hat muttered to himself. Oh, what a rare guest. Looking over, a young face wearing a kimono and holding a walking stick came into view. He was very young, but his eyes were exceptionally weathered. Isn't this Manager Pu Yuan? Suppressing the astonishment in his heart, Dustless asked indifferently, What brings you here from afar? Seeing that you are safe and sound, you seem to have expected that I would not be sealed. Your wisdom is really enviable, Manager Pu Yuan. Dustless emphasized his words, and there was a hint of killing intent in his words. The visitor was Kasuke Urahara. Of course. Kasuke Urahara replied calmly, ignoring Dustless's killing intent. Don't forget that I have been operating in the modern world for 100 years. When you came to settle down in the modern world, I discovered you. I see. Dustless didn't doubt his words and asked with interest, then why is Urahara's store manager here? Don't tell me you're here to arrest me. Hearing this, Urahara Kasuke smiled bitterly. If he really had such strength, he would have gone to the Broken Soul Society. I'm here to seek cooperation. Urahara Kasuke took a deep breath and said solemnly, although I don't know how you broke out of prison, since you escaped and didn't do anything to Soul Society, it means that you don't want Soul Society to be destroyed. After that, Urahara Kasuke looked at Dustless thoughtfully, looking forward to his answer. Idiot, it's only natural that I won't do anything. That's because someone else will do it for me. Dustless despised him in his heart, but he still pretended to be surprised and asked curiously, then why is manager Urahara here? Urahara Kasuke's expression suddenly stiffened, and he said solemnly, to be honest, I'm here to seek cooperation with you. Now Soul Society is on the verge of collapse, and there's a possibility that it will be wiped out by annihilation at any time. Dustless couldn't help but be startled when he heard this. He lowered his head and thought silently, but he was shocked. The Grim Reaper he expected was not so fragile. However, the current situation seemed to be the opposite of what he expected. Dustless hoped that Grim Reaper and Annihilation would both suffer, instead of a one-sided annihilation. It seems that it's just as I thought. Although I don't know the reason, he doesn't want Grim Reaper to be destroyed. Urahara Kasuke suddenly smiled and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He immediately remembered the terrible situation of Soul Society and said bluntly, Annihilation suddenly invaded, and Soul Society is now in imminent danger. Impossible. What about Head Captain Yamamoto and Squad Zero? What are they doing? Don't tell me they've all been wiped out. Dustless asked suspiciously, thinking of the strength of the Head Captain and Squad Zero. They are very strong, but Annihilation is also very strong. They launched a sneak attack first, and Grim Reaper is almost always suppressed. Urahara Kasuke smiled bitterly and said, This time, I came to cooperate with your excellency. Otherwise, Soul Society may step into a land of eternal damnation. Dustless's thoughts changed. Although he was happy that Squad Zero, Head Captain Yamamoto, and Sosuke Aizen were brutally beaten up, it was not in line with his original intention to be defeated by Annihilation. You want to drag me down with you? Dustless asked coldly after a moment. Urahara Kasuke paused for a moment and said, You're right to think so, but this is the current situation of Soul Society. It's true that we have a grudge in the past, but I hope we can put it aside. If Grim Reaper is destroyed, it won't be good for anyone. Dustless didn't doubt Urahara Kasuke's words. Urahara Kasuke's sincerity was enough to come alone. I really didn't expect. That group of Annihilation is so strong that they can suppress Godei 13. Murmuring with a strange light in his eyes, there was a hint of murderous intent in his words. There are too many involved. Do you know Yawatch? Urahara Kasuke asked. The King of Annihilation. Of course, I know. Dustless replied indifferently. Not only did he know, but he also heard a lot about it. He stared at Urahara Kasuke and saw his helpless face and a headache. Obviously, something was wrong. Chapter 1125. Perhaps Urahara Kasuke's words were exaggerated, but it was undeniable that Soul Society was in a stalemate. After all, it was a fact that the Sternritter Legion had annihilated the Grim Reaper. Even Yawatch, Jugram, and the guards did not make a move. By the way, there is another important question. Speaking of this, Urahara Kasuk's face was extremely solemn. He pondered and said, "When I was still the captain of Soul Society, I heard a lot about Yawatch." About Yawatch? Dustless's face flashed with a hint of doubt. He suddenly realized something and said, "It should be the information about Yawatch found in the Daling Library." Indeed. Urahara Kasuk did not deny it. The Daling Library was indeed a mysterious place. But in it, I got a terrible news. After a while, Urahara Kasuk's voice was extremely heavy and hoarse. Dustless could even see the sweat on his temples. "Get to the point." Waving his hand, Dustless's tone had a hint of irritation. He guessed that Urahara Kasuk was going to talk about Yawatch's background again. He had already guessed it. There was no need for Urahara Kasuk to say more. Urahara Kasuk was stunned. He remembered the serious situation and went straight to the point. He said cautiously, "In short, that group of Quincy is very troublesome. We can't let them live even if they die. No matter who wins or loses, this is a calamity." With a fierce look in his eyes, Urahara Kasuk stared at the puzzled Dustless and explained, "The common ancestor of Quincy is Yawatch. They call him the Sealed King. All Quincy have Yawatch's blood in their bodies. Their abilities also belong to Yawatch, including the Sternritter Legion that is attacking Soul Society now. Their abilities are all given by Yawatch. I also know this. Yawatch has an ability called Saint. After a Quincy dies, their souls all belong to Yawatch. He can use Saint to resurrect all those who died." Before Dustless could finish the last few words, his voice suddenly stopped. Looking at his face, it was like a dark cloud. He suddenly realized that once all the Quincy are annihilated, their souls will all return to Yawatch, which may also lead to Yawatch's early resurrection. "It seems that you have realized the problem, so I don't need to explain more." Seeing this, Urahara Kasuk exhaled a mouthful of turbid air and sighed heavily. "So, no matter what, the one who loses in the end is Shinigami. Since you don't want Shinigami to be destroyed, we can work together. Are you not afraid that I will plot against you? After all, we have a grudge." Looking at this moment, Dustless was, Kasuk's Aaron, Kasuk him, even the previous grudges. Was Kasuk. "If I can, of course, I won't cooperate with you, but right now, I have no choice. The group of people in the Mask Legion has gone berserk, and I have no allies to choose from. Although there is still Ishin for me to choose, he has lost the power of Reaper, and he is having fun with his wife and children." Kasuk Urahara said in annoyance, like a defeated rooster. He was dispirited and cursed in his heart. "You are being honest for once." Dustless smiled. He knew that this was the truth, because now the whole world was involved in the war. Even Sosuke Aizen was fighting against Jugram because of Dustless's instigation. No matter who was right or wrong between Kasuk Urahara and Dustless, it didn't matter, because there was only one way to go, and that was to cooperate with Dustless. In the whole world, only Dustless was free at the moment. Cooperation is possible. But, how do you plan to cooperate? First of all, what's in it for me? Dustless suddenly asked. Cooperation is naturally a win-win situation. If there are no benefits, Dustless won't do it. Kasuk Urahara hesitated when he heard this. He also understood the truth that you can't catch the wolf without sacrificing the child. However, what gave him a headache was that there were no benefits for Dustless. Soul Society is going to be finished, and this is the biggest disadvantage for you. Kasuk Urahara's eyes lit up, and he began to quibble. If that's the case, I'm sorry, I can't cooperate with you. Dustless shook his head and directly rejected Kasuk Urahara's conditions. What he meant was that he wanted Dustless to be a coolie, but he didn't get anything in return. Even if Quincy can really annihilate Shinigami, it will definitely be a lose-lose situation in the end. Speaking of this, Dustless's tone was obviously stagnant, and he smiled. I can just sit back and reap the benefits. When Quincy is exhausted, I will lead my subordinates to destroy all of them. Even if Yawatch really resurrects in advance, it can't be helped. I don't think I'm not his opponent. Kasuke Urahara's face was obviously ugly. He never doubted Dustless's strength. Even if his good friend Dustless fought one-on-one, the scale of victory may eventually tilt towards Dustless. After all, Dustless's strength was there, and Kasuke Urahara chose to cooperate with him because he knew how strong he was. In short, without benefits, everything was in vain. Chapter 11:26. Urahara Kasuke bowed his head and was silent for a while. His head was dizzy and very uncomfortable. After thinking hard for a long time, he still didn't think that he could give Dustless anything. Hee. Manager Urahara seems to be very confused. Dustless chuckled, then his face changed, and said with a cunning look, how about I say a condition? Hearing this, Urahara Kasuke restrained his expression, and a cautious look flashed across his face. Staring at Dustless's gloomy face, Urahara Kasuke instinctively felt that something was wrong. He seemed to be making a deal with the devil. Being stared at by Dustless's shining eyes, Urahara Kasuke felt uncomfortable and had a feeling that a great disaster was coming. It doesn't matter if you don't agree, but one thing is certain, Soul Society will not last long. Dustless said calmly, and deliberately added, Head Captain Yamamoto is old, and Soul Society has been severely damaged by me before. The probability of them blocking Quincy's attack is 0, and they are close to extinction. Urahara Kasuke's face turned black and extremely ugly. He gritted his teeth and said, What's the condition? Let's hear it. I knew you would agree, so why are you hiding it? Dustless was very disdainful, and immediately thought for a moment and said, One day in the future, after Soul King falls, you must stand up and support me to become the new Soul King. Urahara Kasuke was petrified, his eyes widened, and stared at Dustless in a daze. Are you serious? Soul King will never fall. Hearing this, Urahara Kasuke's first thought was that he had misheard. The fall of Soul King is inevitable. Even if Yawatch lets Soul King go, Dustless will not let Soul King go. He will devour Soul King in some way, and his strength will be increased explosively. Don't think it's incredible, only I can replace Soul King in the world. Wuchen raised his eyebrows in an unusually serious manner. Soon after, he changed the topic and said, Why do you think Squad Zero didn't kill me to prevent future troubles? In fact, Yawatch is a nightmare for them. After the Spirit King is killed, they can use me as a replacement. Urahara Kasuke nodded in agreement. The existence of Psionic King was a disgrace to Yawatch. Therefore, he wanted to kill Psionic King by any means possible. It was understandable that Team Zero wanted to find a spare tire. However, the existence of the Spirit King is extremely special. Can you really replace him? He is the foundation to maintain the operation of the world. Not everyone can do it. Urahara Kasuke was puzzled and full of doubts. You don't have to worry about this. Do you agree to my conditions or refuse? Dustless shook his head, apparently not interested in answering Urahara Kasuke's question. If you can really do it, I will definitely support you in the future. After all, this is not good for Soul Society. Urahara Kasuke finally chose to compromise. At the same time, he was relieved. If Dustless could really become the Spirit King, then it would be the best. It also meant that this mortal enemy would become an ally from now on. Even if this ally was very strange, and his temper was unpredictable, at least from now on, he could barely be regarded as a comrade in the trenches. You group of idiots are simply stubborn. Of course, I can't replace the Spirit King, but I can change to another way. A group of big idiots. Seeing Urahara Kasuke smiling, Dustless slandered in his heart. Frankly speaking, he really couldn't replace the Spirit King. After all, the Spirit King was created by human factors, and its purpose was to stabilize the entry and exit of souls. Although Dustless had many abilities, he was not omnipotent. He couldn't stabilize the entry and exit of souls in Hueco Mundo, the modern world, and Soul Society. However, if one day the Spirit King and Dustless merged into one, then it would be a different story. Of course, it didn't mean that Dustless himself and the Spirit King merged into one. Just thinking about the Spirit King's strange appearance, Dustless couldn't help but shudder. Absorb the Spirit King into the Hogyoku, let them merge into one, and then I merge with the Hogyoku, hee, then I will be a brand new Spirit King. You group of idiots are really stupid. Looking at Urahara Kasuke with pity, Dustless's heart was full of sympathy. After absorbing the Spirit King, the Hogyoku naturally became a brand new Radiant, and could provide Dustless with more Ryatsu. Although the Hogyoku claimed to be able to evolve infinitely, but since its consciousness was destroyed by him, its ability was greatly reduced. After absorbing the Spirit King, it could naturally make up for the previous fragmentation, and it was possible to go to the next level. It could make up for the loss after erasing the Hogyoku, expand the Hogyoku's limit, and also become the god of death, the Spirit King, becoming the unique supreme leader, commanding the entire death god. Dustless obviously didn't suffer a loss in this deal. It was profitable, and it was very big. But then again, how do you want me to help Death God? Even if my identity is exposed, I don't want to become a wanted criminal in Soul Society again. Staring at Urahara Kasuke's proud smile, Dustless's tone left no room for negotiation. Of course, this is a must. Perhaps because he was in a good mood, Urahara Kasuke suddenly became incomparably flamboyant. He opened his white and blue folding fan, covering half of his face, and smiled. What you want to do is actually very simple. Simple. Hearing this, Dustless directly turned a deaf ear. Urahara Kasuke was willing to lower himself to cooperate with him. It was definitely not a simple task. At least, he couldn't do it himself, otherwise, he wouldn't have made an unnecessary move to cooperate with Dustless. Chapter 11:27. Quietly looking at the complacent Urahara Kasuke, Wuchen couldn't help but feel funny, especially looking at the bandages all over Urahara Kasuke's body. His mind was even more strange. If Urahara Kasuke knew that the person who plotted against him was Wuchen, who knew what he would think? But now, it didn't matter anymore. Your Excellency's task is very simple. Defeat the current leader of Quincy, Jugram. Hearing this, Dustless slightly raised his eyebrows, glanced at Urahara Kasuke suspiciously, and confirmed again, I said before, I won't expose my identity. Dustless rejected Urahara Kasuke without hesitation, feeling that this guy was pushing him into a fire pit. Of course, I know this. There's no need to worry, I've prepared everything. Urahara Kasuke smiled mysteriously, looking very cunning and despicable. I've set up a barrier in Soul Society in advance. As long as we lure Jugram over and defeat this leader of Quincy, other people's attacks will collapse on their own. It's not luck that this guy was able to plot against Sosuke Aizen in the future. Such foresight. I have to guard against him. After taking a deep look at Urahara Kasuke, Dustless withdrew his gaze and nodded, no problem, I also want to see how different this Jugram is. Dustless's eyes were filled with expectation. He still remembered that Jugram had a special identity, the other half of Yawatch. The 75th district of Drifting Soul Street just lured Jugram there. Urahara Kasuke's eyes lit up, and at the same time, he disappeared with the wind. Hey, hey, hey. Are you really going to fight against that guy Jugram? He's very strong. He has the ability to kill a member of Sterncross Knights in one hit. Candace and Bambietta came out of the door, and said with a worried tone, "That wretched uncle in the hat looks very cunning, don't be fooled." "I've made up my mind. Since we'll meet sooner or later, I might as well take the opportunity to test him now." Dustless waved his hand and said with relief. The flames of war in Soul Society soared to the sky, forming a sea of flames. Sosuke, Aizen and Jugram were fiercely fighting, but Aizen was obviously at a disadvantage, and even showed signs of defeat. It's normal for him to be at a disadvantage now. After all, he hasn't swallowed Hogyoku yet, and Sosuke Aizen's biggest trump card is useless against Jugram. Dustless murmured. In the distant battlefield, Aizen Sosuke had been forced to retreat. He hadn't merged with Hogyoku yet, and for some reason, his Kyoka Suigetsu ability was ineffective against Jugram. "I'll let you go and bring that guy over. This guy's strength is really s. He on the other side, Aizen Sosuke felt the tyrannical power coming from the Zanpakuto, and his face became silent. "I'll let you know the consequences of betraying Wandless Empire." Jugram's killing intent surged, and his spiritual pressure went berserk. Just as he was about to deal a fatal blow to Aizen Sosuke, several sharp lights locked onto him. Whoosh! Whoosh! Several transparent arrows shot out from the side, wanting to tear Jugram into pieces. Naive! With a sweep of his sword, a huge ray of white light shot out. Crack! The incoming arrows were instantly reduced to ashes, but Jugram's slash was unstoppable. It flew toward the attacker like a rainbow piercing through the sun. Agility! A ripple appeared in Jugram's eyes, and he was very surprised when he saw who it was. He immediately abandoned Aizen Sosuke and chased after Barrow. "Although I don't know what's going on, this is good. I don't want to expose my strength either. It's best if you guys can kill more death gods. That would be for the best." Aizen glanced at Jugram and turned to leave. "Stop right there, Agility!" Jugram roared. It was because of him that Quincy, who had been hiding for thousands of years, had to resurface. He still needed to solve all the mysteries. "'Tis." On the 75th Street, Dustless, who was resting, opened his eyes and stared at the figure coming from the horizon. A teasing smile appeared on his face. Agility Barrow was controlled by his Rinnegan. After a while, Agility Barrow landed on the ground and strangely disappeared. "This is..." Jugram narrowed his eyes. His thick black eyebrows were involuntarily raised. His gaze immediately spread out and a smiling Wu Chin was reflected in his eyes. "'Tis you." Jugram was stunned and frowned. "'Tis you who should be suppressed, why are you here?" Dustless was unmoved when he heard that. He smiled lazily and said, "I can only tell you one thing. The person who is going to be suppressed today is called Jugram Hasward." "'Tis you." Jugram sneered, "'Tis you who thinks that Team Zero can't do anything to you, and I can't do anything to you? Don't." Bang! Before Jugram could finish his sentence, a flash of light came and he was sent flying by Dustless' sneak attack. "I hate people like you who have no strength but are arrogant." Chapter 11:28. This kick was merciless. It sent Jugram flying hundreds of meters away. A large footprint could be seen on his handsome face. "Humph. You're asking for it." Dustless sneered in his heart. It was fine if Yawatch wanted to die. After all, his strength was there for all to see. However, this Jugram was just a personal bodyguard. To put it bluntly, he was just a lackey. "Not bad. You're quite strong." Jugram, who had stood up, was indifferent. It was as if Dustless had kicked someone else. He was very quiet and cold. He did not even touch the wound and ignored it. "This guy is quite open-minded," Dustless said in astonishment as he looked at Jugram. "But that's all there is to it." With a cold laugh, Jugram formed a great sage bow in an instant. It was a weapon specially used by Quincy. Great sage bow. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Following Jugram's order, a dense rain of arrows instantly shot out. The sharpness of the arrows made one unable to look at them directly. The sharp whistling sound made one's scalp go numb. The attacks were ruthless. They were aimed at Dustless's eyes, heart, and head. He. Insignificant skill. Glancing faintly at the arrows that were completely compressed by spiritual particles, Wuchen directly ignored them. His body directly glowed with a faint light. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The cold light pierced through Dustless's body. However, he was completely unscathed. The damaged parts only glowed with a golden light. Then, they were repaired. He was completely fine. Looks like Bazabi was right. "You do have the ability to ignore physical attacks." A strange emotion appeared on Jugram's clean face. He lowered his tactics and spoke with a rare gentleness in his voice. "The Wanless Empire needs experts like you. If you're willing to join us, we can let bygones be bygones. Your friends will also receive the most sincere care." Pfft. Dustless could not help but laugh. He teased, "If you chop off Yawach's head and give it to me as a urinal, I'll consider it. You're courting death." Hearing this, thick killing intent flashed across Jugram's face, and his spiritual pressure soared by countless times. "You think you're invincible?" That was unrealistic. According to the information that Busby got from you, the ability of the Holy Word can reach your body after you enter the Holy Body. As soon as he finished speaking, 2 pairs of pure white wings appeared behind Jugram's back. They shone brightly and looked extremely holy. However, in Dustless's eyes, it was an eyesore. "Do you think you're an angel just because you have 2 chicken feathers?" Dustless mocked. His pupils widened, and the black flames began to burn endlessly. Tens ho! Netherworld flames burned on both sides of Jugram's wings, rapidly devouring the surface area of his pure white wings. He was slightly taken aback when he saw this, but he immediately swung his blade without hesitation. Poochie! The pure white wings were ruthlessly chopped off by Jugram, and there wasn't the slightest bit of hesitation on his face. "This fellow seems very difficult to deal with." Seeing this, Dustless frowned slightly. Photons condensed in his hand and compressed into a high-density greatsword. Looking at the greatsword in Dustless's hand, Jugram asked, "Is this your Bankai?" "I don't have a Zanpakuto." Hearing this, Dustless replied in disappointment. This was the only regret in his life. Then, he calmly changed the topic and said, "But I do have a Zanpakuto, so I don't need it to deal with a small pawn like you." "You!" Dustless's sarcasm would have angered even a person with a good temper. Jugram, who had an unkind expression, pounced over with a twisted face. Philian kick. Like a space jump, Jugram instantly appeared behind Dustless. Then, a sharp aura swept up and mercilessly cut toward Dustless's head. Shinra Tensei. The repulsive force erupted rapidly. Caught off guard, Jugram was instantly sent flying by this force. Seeing this, Dustless's eyes shot out a cold light. He did not stop and chased after him. The chakra in his body boiled, and his gaze locked onto Jugram's torn clothes. Dustless's eyes widened, and he shouted, "Heavenly hand power." Dustless, who was 20 to 30 meters away, instantly appeared behind Jugram. A huge flash of light filled with destructive aura mercilessly greeted his head. Lightspeed kick. Resplendent flashes of light rumbled and annihilated Jugram's entire body. The powerful force kicked him into the air. Go to hell, eyesore of a small fry. Dustless, whose eyes were filled with murderous intent, was as terrifying as a prehistoric beast. His spiritual pressure burst out like a torrential rain, faintly revealing a turbid coat of arms, an unruly and arrogant talent, surge, negation, a rebound, extend to the ground, know your own powerlessness. Staring at the charred figure in the sky, Dustless finished his chant and spoke in a cold voice. Breaking the Tao's 90th black coffin. Under Dustless's all-out chant, the power of the black coffin instantly increased. It was eerie and terrifying. An incomparably huge black coffin stood on the ground, emitting an ancient and decaying aura. Inside it, countless sharp invisible blades suddenly appeared and attacked Jugram's body at the same time. Fortunately, Urahara Kasuk had set up a barrier in advance, so no one saw this exaggerated scene. The sharp edges of the black coffin tore Jugram into pieces at the same time. Chapter 1129. Perhaps it was a misconception, but Dustless actually saw Jugram break out of his cocoon and be reborn. He's actually fine. After a while, Dustless said in shock after confirming that he was not mistaken. Looking closely, Jugram's body was clean and unharmed. He was completely unharmed. He had not been attacked at all. He was completely at ease. It was as if none of the attacks had hit him. What's going on? Stroking his chin, Dustless looked left and right. He was sure that his previous series of attacks had heavily injured Jugram. Even if he had been blessed by the heavens and survived, he should have at least been injured. But now, he was completely unharmed. What's that? Looking up at the sky, Dustless suddenly realized that the sky had darkened. A strangely shaped scale was floating in the sky, leaning toward Dustless. This seems to be Jugram's ability. In the original work, he used this ability to break Tsangdu's ability and instantly kill him, Dustless pondered. Looking at the unscathed Jugram, a look of understanding flashed in his eyes. Jugram's codename in the Wandless Empire was B, and his ability was Balance. This was the scale floating in the sky. Once the scale fell toward Dustless, his abilities and strength would be unlimitedly weakened. I see. Suddenly understanding, Dustless praised, the black coffin that attacked you, as well as the body art from before, were all weakened by you. No wonder you were unaffected. You're not simple. Hearing this, Jugram did not feel any joy. Instead, his brows furrowed tightly. His wariness toward Dustless had reached an unprecedented level. He rarely made a move, but Dustless had seen through his ability. You're right. Since his ability had been seen through, Jugram did not hide it and directly admitted it. He said calmly, "This is my holy word ability, Balance. When the scale floating in the sky falls toward you, all of your abilities will be weakened. Your skills will not harm me at all, just like that ghost path just now. It has no effect on me at all." He is indeed very strong. Dustless didn't comment when he heard this, and then he took the initiative to launch an awe-inspiring attack. Tao Breaker 88, Flying Dragon Strikes the Thief. In the blink of an eye, a thick beam of light shot out, engulfing and annihilating Jugram. Who would have thought that Jugram, who was bathed in the light, would be completely unscathed? He didn't react at all, and his face remained as calm as an ancient well. What was even more shocking was that he was slowly walking over against the light. In his hand was a cold glinting sword, and he strolled over in a relaxed manner. Damned Yawatch. Upon seeing this, Dustless couldn't help but curse his friend Habak. That was because all of the Starcross Knight's abilities came from him, and this inconceivable balance ability was far too overpowered. Dustless's attacks were weakened, and the damage he dealt to Jugram was 0. Swish! Swish! Jugram's speed was 10 times faster than before, and he couldn't even catch a glimpse of his shadow. By the time he realized this, Jugram had already sliced through his body. At the crucial moment, Dustless decisively used God's might to materialize himself. "You didn't hit me." Jugram was stunned, and his tone was filled with doubt. He subconsciously looked at Dustless, but what he got in return was a cold beam of light. Poochie! The sword light cut through Jugram's body, and the blood on the blade of the heavenly sword of clouds evaporated rapidly. Jugram looked at the wound on his waist and felt the piercing pain all over his body. He couldn't believe it and said, "Impossible, you should have been weakened by my ability." "Weakened? You have indeed weakened me." Dustless shook his head. His black coffin didn't have any effect on Jugram, and this explained everything. "However, even if you weaken me without limit, the difference between the two of us is still like heaven and earth. It's just like an ocean. Even if you suck in 99% of its water, it's not something a stream can compare to. Do you understand what I mean?" Jugram's face turned green. How could he not understand what Dustless meant? He sneered and said, "In other words, you can deal with me with the remaining 1% of your strength?" As expected of Yawach's loyal lackey, so smart. Dustless gave him a thumbs up, and his expression was extremely cold. He unleashed all of his strength and charged at Jugram with his sword. His expression was calm and fearless. Jugram's balancing ability was indeed a heaven-defying and invincible existence. When one side of the sky was lowered, the enemy would be weakened in all aspects. On the other hand, Jugram's strength would increase exponentially. However, for a skill like God's might, it was useless no matter how much it was weakened. This skill wasn't an attack in the first place. Bang, bang, bang. The two of them fought back and forth fiercely. Saber light and sword shadows flashed and sparks danced in the air. Boom, boom, boom. Along with a loud boom, a white figure was sent flying. Dustless had won for now. Huff, huff, huff. This bastard's ability actually reduced spiritual pressure, stamina, effort, and even the chakra in my body to a negligible level. Dustless panted heavily. Just a few rounds of fighting and he was already half dead from exhaustion. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.